No.
I've been fine. How about you?
Yeah.
Yeah. All good. All good.
Yeah.
Rock and roll. Pretty sure you're on fishing season. I'm ready to get back from last year. You guys are out on here? Nice, nice. And one permit.
Hey, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our meeting of the Fish and Wildlife Board. Today is January 18th, and it is now 5 o'clock. The first item of the agenda is why don't we go around and have board members introduce themselves as being here so that everyone will know. I will start with myself, Brad Ferland, Caledonia County.
Brian Bailey, Washington County.
David Dean, Wyndham County.
Rick Barnum, Windsor County.
Neil Hogan, Bennington County.
Jamie Dragon, Oil County.
Martin Van Buren, Rock County.
Michael Bancroft, Orange County.
Jay Sweeney, Franklin County.
David Robillard, Orleans County.
And online,
Michael Colson, Essex County.
Allison Frazier, Chittenden County.
okay, it looks like Bob Anderson is not with us as of yet, anyway.
Brian McCarthy, Grand Isle County.
He spoke, it was just really quiet.
Yeah, Brian is here. Brian McCarthy. Okay, thank you. And Commissioner, introduce yourself and your staff with us tonight.
Sure, thank you. Good afternoon. Good evening. I'm Christopher Harder, Commissioner of the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And I'll let staff, the whole row of folks here tonight. I'll let Allie, why don't you go ahead and start, and then we'll move this direction.
Yes, I'm Allie Thomas, the Director of the Outreach Division. Gail Connolly, the Principal Assistant for Commissioner.
Mark Scott, Director of Wildlife.
Catherine Guessing, General Counsel.
Chris Saunders, Project Manager.
Eric Fulmer, Fish Division Director.
Anybody online for the department?
We will have two more staff coming later for the fish presentation, so.
Okay, great. Thank
Report will be on later this year. Most likely David Sotsville, Dr. Katie Dieter, a bionutrition research manager. So we have a few staff members that are going to be listening in tonight.
you. Okay, thank you. So the first item on our agenda, we have a busy agenda tonight, and looks like we have a few people who are going to want to speak, make some public comments. But the first item on our agenda, before we get there, is to approve the minutes from the October 19th, 2022 meeting. Have a motion from everybody to do so?
You're right.
And just one correction, is Sweeney spelled wrong throughout. NY, not NEY.
No, three.
Yeah.
Three.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Make motion, accept it. I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion to accept the minutes as amended, as corrected. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstains, okay, ayes have it, it's approved. Okay, second item on the agenda tonight is public comments. And like every week, we welcome the public to speak at our meetings. And we limit the time to speak to 2 minutes, just to give everybody opportunity to speak that wants to, and that's consistent with what we've done in the past and what we'll do in the future. So I've got a list of names here of people that Allison has given me, and I'll just start at the top and ask if you want to make public comments. Justin Lindholm,
Yes,
yes, okay.
I'd like to just give a heads up to sports people, especially hunters, about the new idea of posting land that is being proposed by some in Vermont, which is to paint trees instead of putting up posted signs. Now, some background on Vermont's posted sign law, which seems to be really strict, but it says in our constitution, which is the most liberal constitution in the entire world, they came out with this constitution idea of all game, fish, wildlife is owned by the state. And it is the right of the common citizen to go after and harvest these animals. And they made it so that you would have to enclose your land. In the Constitution, it says, Vermont Constitution, you have to enclose your land if you want to exclude people. They meant by that you would tend a certain area for your crops, for your animals that you're raising, domestic animals. That's why they made it so that you have to sign each sign every year with the date. You have to register with the town clerk to show that you are tending this area, that you are excluding people. I had to live out of state for a couple of years, several years while I was a kid growing up. I started off with many years of Vermont hunting and fishing. I was horrified by how hard it is to hunt in other states. Don't have this sort of liberty that we have. We have liberties in that Vermont Constitution that are stunning to any other. We could walk into that state house in any door when they're in session, and we have to be allowed in unless it's too crowded. That is pretty neat. And the same with these fish and wildlife laws, that we can fish and we can hunt. It's the state animals. We get to go after them. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next individual on my list, I'm not sure that I can, is it Bev?
Yeah.
From Moncton? Okay. So if you could just introduce yourselves as I call you out, in case I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly.
I'm Bev Soychek. I'm running a beaver project in Moncton, and I just wanted to give you guys an update. We have a lot of community support, and we had Skip come for 2 weeks. He did a extensive evaluation of our hot spots and is doing some work in the spring. We're very excited about moving forward, and we're working with Zapata Courage to do some mapping and some management planning for in the future. Now to the bad things that happened. Despite the trapping not working, we had a lot of trapper interference. Every positive action we took was met with a negative one. There was a lot of misleading information spread to disrespect us and our grantor protect our wildlife. They went so far as to tell our community not to give us money. They were very calculating and antagonistic. It got so bad that I almost resigned my involvement despite, because they were so intimidating to me. Despite having all of our property owners in these sites that wanted it, they still tried to stop us. They were relentless in their pursuit. A cease and desist order was even served on one of their lobbyists for spreading false information about our grantor Protect Our Wildlife to our select board. The rhetoric hurt everyone in the eyes of our select board, and it was not appreciated by our community that has a lot of values. We sent a letter to the Trappers Association to ask them to calm the rhetoric down, and I also copied Fish and Wildlife. Our group and our select board are very well educated. We've done a lot of research, and we just don't respect these behaviors at all. And we're not going to tolerate them come spring. Recently, one of them went so far as to insinuate that poor Clara's owner was to blame for her death because he didn't have her on a retractable leash. So they want their dogs to run loose, but they want us to have ours on leashes. I respectfully ask that Fish and Wildlife rethink their relationship with Skip. And also thank you for having Jackie come. We had a great thing with her for the bears.
Thank you. Next on the list is Rod Coronado, possibly.
Just observing tonight. Thank you.
Observing, okay. Emily Ruff from Orange, I believe.
Yes, I'm also just attending an observance. I just want to comment that I've tuned in for the remote meetings and just had some trouble navigating the audio at times. So just wanted to come be present in person. Thank you all for introducing yourselves also tonight. I haven't noticed that on the remote meetings, and that was really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. David Lasky, I believe.
I've just recently become a hunter or ambassador for Huntable Lifetime. What I'm trying to propose is that we allow these Huntable Lifetime gives hunts for children with life-threatening diseases, 21 and under, and they come to moose hunt. And our fall moose hunt for them with firearms is later in the year. I'd like to be able to hunt with these 3 kids in the early October season. I think it would give them more of a hunting experience Because we can call moose, it's a little more interaction. And it's easier to get a moose to come to them versus getting them to go to them. A lot of the kids can't, they have mobility issues. Disease itself. So I'm trying to get something to where they can hunt a little earlier when the rut's on. It'll also be beneficial for them is when they get to see the state of Vermont, is the foliage is at a peak by then. So that's what I'm here for today.
Great.
Thank you guys very much for all you do.
Thank you. Okay, next on the list, I believe, is Sandy Gorslin, possibly. Sandy, is
Hi.
that correct?
Actually, Sarah
Sarah,
Porcine, yeah.
And
I'll come to the front.
Grand Isle, I believe?
Yes, hello, I'm, Happy New Year, everyone. By the way, I'm Sarah Borsline, located up in Grand Isle. I'm speaking as a Vermonter and also as a member of Project Coyote, which is a national organization that's science-based, advocating for practical and cost-saving coexistence strategies with native wildlife. We wanted to comment, my colleagues at Project Coyote and I wanted to comment on the your recommendations under Act 159 for the legislature. We find them woefully inadequate. We noticed that it was basically a cut and paste of the Vermont Trapping Association recommendations, which I'm not sure how that happened, but there are only 2 differences from their list of recommendations. Whereas many of my colleagues that Protect Our Wildlife and Vermont Wildlife Coalition, none of their recommendations were factored in. I also just wanted to pull a sheet from your responsive management survey here. At the bottom of this, tucked at the bottom, we can see that, for example, 68% of Vermonters are opposed to recreational trapping. Let me repeat that. 68% of Vermonters are opposed to recreational trapping. Whereas, let me take a look at another page from your responsive management survey. This shows what survey respondents actually use the great outdoors for. What we see here is 69% of Vermonters in your survey are using it for hiking and recreation in the wild versus, for example, 4% of respondents are trapping. So I'm asking the Board of Fish and Wildlife to explain that discrepancy between how Vermonters generally feel about our wildlife and what you're doing about it to regulate things like trapping. And we are advocating for a trapping ban this year. We hope that that goes through in the legislature. I also just wanted to make a brief note about coyote hounding. We oppose that. We don't believe that tags and collars are going to fix your problems here with landowners. So the Fish and Wildlife needs to come up with better recommendations on that. Also, just a note that kill methods under the trapping law were never agreed upon. So we'd like to see some improvements on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Has anybody else joined from the public that would like to make comments?
I'm Rob Steele. I own Tom's Bait and Tackle in Thomasine, Vermont. I don't really have any comments other than, I guess maybe our agent fees for selling licenses is something that could possibly be looked at. It's been 20 plus years that the agents have been getting $1.50 for a license that we sell. And since that time, all the agents have had to purchase computers, printers, pay for the ink, pay for the paper to print the licenses. Whereas in prior years, there was no cost out of pocket for the agents. So I was just curious if at some point, maybe you guys could look at reviewing the rates for the agents and kind of get them up to times here. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that it? That's hard, yeah.
That's it in the room, but
Okay.
we do have quite a few online we can go through.
Okay, sure.
First would be Andy Phelan. You announced that.
Andy Phelan, if you could, I think you're muted. We're not hearing you at this point.
Sorry, I'm new to this this kind of platform rather than Zoom. I'm just auditing this class this time. I wrote a commentary to the Vermont Digger about the killing of a sow bear with cubs, knowing that the sow bear had cubs. So I've sent an email to the commissioner, to council, and to the assistant to the commissioner, just looking into what the processes are for proposing or petitioning for a rule. So you'll be hearing from me later. I'm just auditing this meeting to see how you guys run things there. So thank you and Happy New Year.
And
McKenzie.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much for offering this public comment section. I'll try to do this quickly. I understand that the board and the Fish and Wildlife Department are in the process of modernizing trapping laws. I had a terrible incident happen last month. My dog was killed in a body gripping trap just a mile from my house. Nice afternoon walk down the trail. I let her off the leash as is legal in Corinth, and she sauntered off into the woods 50 feet away, got into a conibear trap, was killed. She died in my arms. It was an unforgettable experience. So I've been doing some thinking, and just have some ideas for how the regulations could maybe be modernized, improved upon. If you'll bear with me for just a minute here, I've got 5 recommendations. The first one would be to require trappers to post signage in the area where they are doing trapping. I know of 2 conscientious trappers, one of whom is right here in Corinth, who they do this already. And I don't see why it can't be a requirement, just as a safety measure. There are a lot of people nowadays who like to go out and hike on trails and in the woods and in fields. And, a lot of dogs getting caught in leg hold traps. And then, of course, my poor girl was killed in the conibear. So just have some signage, temporary signage. Take care, trapping in progress, along with the trapper's name and phone number. I think that would be great. I think it would create some goodwill between the trapping community and the rest of us. Number 2.
And can I jump in? Again, we only have 2 minutes. And so if I could just interrupt you just for a minute, if you could just, quickly give us your 5 points, and then we can move on quickly. And okay, and then so do it. We're at the 2 minutes, but if you could do it just very quickly, and then email us the detail, if you will, please.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
To the commissioner.
Okay. Thanks. Number 2, increase public awareness. People don't know about trapping. Fish and Wildlife should put out press release in the fall. Trapping season is upon us. There are things that could be done with your website, an information page, a video on how to release a trap, things like that. Increase penalties for trapping violations. My dog was caught in an illegal trap, and this guy, if he's found, will not be facing much of a violation or much of a penalty. Limit the use of body gripping traps. I understand that this discussion is already underway. I think it would be great. Get them up off the ground, 5 feet up. That's what they should be. Trapping regulations info. I think that on your website, you direct people to the eregulations.com website. That's a stupid. It's very amateurish. Put all your information right on the vermontfishandwildlife.com website. It would look much more professional. Okay, I think that's it for me. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And Ann, on behalf of the board, I'd like to say we're sorry about your dog, and it's an unfortunate situation. And as a pet owner, I can't imagine what you're going through. So thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, next.
Laura listed it.
Okay, Laura. You could, if you're there. I guess not. Okay, next. Paul Noel, if you are interested in speaking, you're up. Okay, I think that's all we have right now for public comments. We will close public comments at this point. And thank you, everybody. We appreciate your comments. I would just like to make one point, is that one of the speakers spoke to recommendations that we have. So as a board, we have not received any recommendations yet for any of the hounding. We have not developed any rules around what we're going to propose. That is all still with the department, and that is worked its way through the department process, and they ultimately will make recommendations to us. And then we as a board will deliberate on those and decide what we eventually want to propose as changes to the rule. So we are at the very early stages of that, and that is still with the department. And the survey that was also referenced, again, we have not seen that survey. We're going to be speaking to that survey tonight. We have not seen the results of it, and so that will be part of our agenda. Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda, speaking of survey, is understanding survey research and fish and wildlife management. And we have as a guest tonight, we have Mark Duda, Dr. Mark Duda, Executive Director of Responsive Management. And I will turn this over to Mark, who can introduce Dr. Duda for us, please.
Thank you, Brad. Mark is here tonight. If you recall back in October, I think, I don't know what board member asked a question about, when we're doing a fur bear survey. I think for members that have been on the board for a few years, there's different surveys that we refer to when we're making our management recommendations to you. I know we did one when we did the big game plan, we do it on deer, we do it on moose. We update these periodically, and when I asked the board if you'd be interested in to have what we feel is the expert in the country on surveying on fish and wildlife and doing polling, I saw a head nodding from everybody back. Don't ask me the number of years, but back some years ago, this person, Mark Damien Duda, did a presentation to the board on a very similar subject. It was well received by the board members at that time. So we're not paying Mark to do this. We asked him. He was more than happy to help. He cares. He's a professional wildlife biologist that has made his whole career doing this. He's the executive director of Responsive Management. Over the past 35 years, he's conducted over 1,000 studies on how people relate to the natural world, covering 50 states and 15 different countries. He's the author of 4 books on wildlife and outdoor recreation and more than 150 published articles and peer-reviewed papers. His work has been featured on National Public Radio, CNN, the New York Times, Newsweek, and front pages of the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and USA Today. He's a certified wildlife biologist, a social scientist, and holds a master's degree in natural resource policy from Yale University. Firsthand, I can remember one of the first fish and wildlife professional conferences I was at. He was a guest speaker. It was back in the 80s, and I couldn't find a seat in the room. He's invited and goes graciously to all types of professional conferences all over the world, whether it's national conferences, regional conferences or not, and is incredibly well received by both fish and wildlife and law enforcement people attending these conferences. So it's my great pleasure and almost humble to introduce Mark here tonight. It maybe be about an hour what he asked, because what I asked him to do is talk about the science, the social science of surveying and polling and the validity into that. Just like our staff talks to you a lot on how do we come up with deer management numbers, moose management numbers, waterfall. We first share with you the process and the methods and the science behind it. So that's what he's going to focus on. He's not here just to talk about the recent trapping fur bear survey and attitudes of Vermonters, but we did ask him to touch on some highlights on that. And given the length of the presentation, all the different areas he's going to cover with you in a quick worldwide tour, it's something if you were taking a college class, you probably take this knowledge base. I talked with him this afternoon. We felt it best if the board could hold questions to the end. And most likely the question you may ask, he's probably going to cover it a couple slides later on. But please jot down any questions or comments as we go along. He's here for you for this presentation, given his time up. So hopefully we can take full advantage, and folks that are here will speak up and talk with him. So Mark, hope you can hear us okay, and I'm going to turn it over to you. And thank you so much for being here. I remember the last time you were here in person, and it's just a great pleasure to see you. Thank you very much.
You're on mute, Mark. Mark, there we go. Yep. Mark, you're muted. We can't hear you.
Yeah.
in Florida. Watch the must-see interview tonight.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Volume is good and you can see my slides.
Not your slides.
Okay, I'm going to put my slides up and start from the beginning. And just want to do a check. It's always awkward from this side.
Fish and Wildlife.
Okay, so you can see my slides and you can hear me.
Yes. Yes. Yep.
Perfect. Okay, good. Well, that's the hardest part of the presentation. So, and the part that I get nervous about is like, is this going to work? So first off, thank you very much for the introduction. That was embarrassing. So I'm going to give you a presentation. And I've got a bunch of stuff, maybe 45 minutes or so, but I know that the board was interested in sort of the whole idea of survey research, of this area that we talked about called the human dimensions of wildlife and the people side of things. So I sort of put some stuff together this afternoon based on the survey that we did for you, based on some questions that I've seen over the years, and basically some methods in terms of what people like me do to get the information that we have. So again, thanks so much for that super kind introduction. And maybe next time I'll be in person. I'm really going to talk about 4 different things, sort of big picture things that we're going to go to in depth on each. I'm going to give you a little bit of information about who we are and what we do. And I think that's important just from a standpoint of I've been giving you all numbers now for close to 25 years. So I think it's important for you to know who we are, what else we do, and things that we can share with you in the future. I wanted to talk about sort of the big picture of things, and I just called that things to keep in mind. And then I'm going to get into the human dimensions, sort of the research end of things, so give you some overviews on how we get this information, quantitative data, qualitative data, and sort of the positive and negatives of a lot of different methods. And then finally, Mark asked me to sort of give a selected results and overview of the study we did titled Vermont Residents' Attitudes Toward Fur Bearer Management. So I'd like to start from the sort of the beginning, at least, of fish and wildlife management. I can hear you and you can hear me. Does anybody know who this is? This is a person with a dog. It's not Lassie's father. Does anybody recognize this person? You've probably read his words. You've probably read his books. He wrote a book called Game Management. And then he also wrote a book called Sand County Almanac. Who might that be? Aldo Leopold. And Leopold really, in a lot of ways, started the whole science of fish and wildlife management in the United States, professionally trained. He was a biologist, and in a lot of ways, he was a biologist. Started numerous organizations, was involved with the Wildlife Society, the Wilderness Society. I mean, just an amazing person. And a lot of what we do, even our management techniques today, are based on a lot of Leopold's initial writings. But one of the cool things that I saw just years ago that I've used a lot because it's sort of my field is a quote that he wrote in the 1940s. And he said, "The problem of wildlife management is not how we should handle the deer. The real problem is one of human management. Wildlife management is comparatively easy. Human management is difficult." It's pretty profound from somebody writing that 80 years ago. And if you think about it, let's just put in place in terms of what it is that we do. I hope you can see my cursor here, but fish and wildlife professionals sort of are in the middle of this whole thing and sort of a triangle of managing and working and interacting with fish and wildlife populations, with fish and wildlife habitats, and with people. And if you think about it, if you're a biologist, if you're a board member, if you're the director of the agency, if you're somebody who's involved with conservation, when you deal with fish and wildlife management with those three parts: populations, habitats, and people. And one of the things that I really learned quickly in my professional career, I started actually with, at the time it was called the Florida Game Commission. Now it's the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, that we were really scientific when it came to managing fish and wildlife populations. We would read journals, the Journal of Wildlife Management, Wildlife Society Bulletin, Journal of Wildlife Management, Ornithology, before we did things. And the same was true when it came to fish and wildlife habitats. But there was a real double standard when it came to working with people. You know, people think this, or I think this, or these two people say this. And so while we're very scientific when it comes to those two aspects of wildlife management, you know, sometimes we're not so specific and sort of not so studious when it comes to people. We sort of base ours on assumption, on conjecture, on, you know, what two or three people say, or what we think sometimes. And so my field for the past really 40 years has been this whole part here, the human dimensions of fish and wildlife. And certainly we understand, and as a wildlife biologist as well, that all of these things interact. We don't just do what people say. We don't, you know, there's always different things involved with each of those three dimensions of fish and wildlife management. But when we talk about the science, that's so important, because if you really think about the things that we've done when we start applying science to wildlife management, is, man, we've done a really good job. We've brought back the deer, white-tailed deer. We've brought back turkey and wood duck and Rocky Mountain elk, tundra swans, and so many other species. And it's because our sort of implementation of what it is we do is based on a solid foundation of fact. And I think it's really important to think, okay, well, we've been so successful in the fish and wildlife management field for basing what we do on a solid foundation of fact. Doesn't it just kind of make sense that when it comes to that third aspect of wildlife management, people, that we should do the same thing, that we should do it in a scientific type of way? And that's a lot of what we've done for now 35 years. So in terms of who we are, we're started by the Western Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies in 1985. And the Western agencies said, you know, we're really good at managing wildlife, but when we talk about people, we speculate. We don't really know about people in that same scientific manner. And so I worked for the Western for about 5 years. And then we started doing a lot of work, and they said, you know, Mark, you should kind of go out on your own. So as a budding wildlife biologist in social science, I was getting kicked out of the nest and went private in 1990. And now I've got about 100 people working for me doing a lot of this human dimensions work around the world. And so we specialize in that human dimensions of natural resource and outdoor recreation issues. And we've been doing that now continuously for 33 years. As we speak, we're doing studies right now on black bears in Virginia and Maryland, on manatees in Florida, on crab catch in Washington State, on big game in Maine. And overall, we've done about 1,000 survey projects just on natural resource issues. Now, I do some political polling, but I'll tell you why we do that, because it comes into handy here. As Mark said, we've done work in all 50 states and 15 countries, and in every single state fish and wildlife agency. So I can really help over the years, and you've all sought my advice on what other agencies are doing. We do work for all the major NGOs. You probably heard of the Recreational Boating and Fishing Foundation, American Sport Fishing Association, Sierra Club, Nature Conservancy, Ducks Unlimited, Rocky Mountain Elk. I mean, literally the entire span from, you know, all the way from one organization and their missions all the way down the line. And we also do a lot of work for a lot of manufacturers, equipment you've probably used. Binoculars, firearms, boats. We do work for Yamaha Motor and a bunch of others. Over that time, we've gotten to work with gorillas in Africa. I love this picture that my daughter took. This is actually a little baby gorilla sitting on a mama gorilla. One of my favorite pictures. I got lucky to do that. We've been to Africa 15 times doing work. We've written a number of books on wildlife viewing and watching wildlife, as you know. A lot of people go out to view wildlife. I've written a number of journal articles. We did the wildlife values study with Colorado State University and Ohio State University. And then recently, we spent a lot of time on trying to get money for the state fish and wildlife agencies through the RAWA, the Restoring America's Wildlife Act. And certainly, I know that you all hear differences of opinions and, people want this or people want that. But the truth is that the binding glue for all of us, no matter what we think about this issue or that, we all care deeply about wildlife, and we know wildlife needs to be funded. And so didn't pass this time, it got left out. But I think that in the future, we're going to see more money for agencies to do more non-game work as well. And then finally, I just wanted to tell you that we do a lot of work for universities. Sometimes I like to look at it and I think, wow, does this look like the college football top 25 or the basketball top 25 with Penn State in there and University of Southern California or Clemson? We do a lot of work from Auburn. I want to say A to Z, Auburn University to, I guess Yale's the only one. I need to find a university with starts with a Z to do work for, and we can say we've done it for A to Z. But we do a lot of work here in Virginia with the University of Virginia system. And I was talking to Dr. Moore about a presentation I was doing, which is this one. And she said, well, let me write you something just to let people know that we really like your work. And I'm real honored to do a lot of work for universities, because when you're doing data collection for universities, they're that you're doing it correctly and by the book. And so Mary wrote me this yesterday, actually, about our methods, our questionnaire review, making sure we don't ask biased or leading questions, and other things. So I just wanted to share that with you as well. So sort of enough about that, but let's talk a little bit about results, because that's really what a lot of this comes down to. Are you really getting at what's really out there? And so I'm going to share two surveys with you, and this is why I do political polling. We're not political in any way, shape, or form. We're sort of bipartisan, nonpartisan, but you're going to ask me, well, is this, what you find for me here in Vermont, Mark, is that, how do we know that's true? Because anybody could sort of say anything. Oh, 80% say this, 20% say this, 50%, how the heck do you know if those are true? Well, the best way to see if somebody knows what they're talking about is if they can get elections right. And the work that we're doing here with the University of Virginia system, their data collection, in 2020, we were able to predict, using the exact same methods that we used for you all for this trapping study, we were able to predict the presidential election here in Virginia within 1.5 percentage points. 1.5 percentage points. So Biden won Virginia by 10 points in 2020. 2021, we had a gubernatorial race. And you would think, well, a year later, the Democrat's going to win by 10 points. And so as we proceeded doing series of surveys over that time, once we got right to the end, it was pretty clear that the Republican GOP candidate, Glenn Youngkin, probably was going to win that. Again, it's really hard to predict voter behavior. But we were, again, within 1.5% of that gubernatorial election as well. And so, again, when people ask me, well, I'm a biologist, I care about conservation, why are you doing this kind of political polling? And it's for this very reason of, are those methods that we are using truly reflecting what's out there? So just wanted to share that with you as well. So let's now turn sort of from that in terms of who we are and what we do to what I thought of things to keep in mind. And I wrote this afternoon just for you all. It's not some generic thing, because I hear what's going on. I get emails from people. I get really nice emails and really nasty emails from people in Vermont. So I feel like I know what's going on. I've heard some things. So let's talk about some things. Let's talk about the definition of what bias is, something called the importance of probability-based sampling, the importance of neutral, non-leading questions, keeping things in perspective, and sort of my shield is the importance of not shooting the messenger. So let's take these one at a time. So what is bias? Oh, that's biased. Well, in the survey world, what that means is the textbook definition is the systematic exclusion of a subset of the population due to a particular attribute. If you do a phone survey, you can't just take people who are in the phone book or the old phone book. And so what are some exaggerations of bias? Well, if I went to a People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals in Vermont, let's say in a meeting, and I said, do you approve or disapprove of regulated trapping? I'd probably get 100% who disapprove. But if I went to a group of hunters and I said that same question, I get 98 or 100% of them approving. And so all of a sudden it's like, well, why is that? Well, you know, of course, this is a superlative, it's an exaggeration, but that's a biased sample. Of course, you're going to get that. And so sometimes people sort of surround themselves with other people who think like they do and think the world thinks like that. And so, yeah, it's probably not good over here. Yeah, it's probably not good over here. And this cartoon figure of a person yelling and screaming might be a stakeholder or whatever who thinks their view is exactly what everybody else thinks as well. And so when we talk about probability-based sampling, we talk about the importance of every single person in that sample, whether it's Vermont residents or hunters or trappers or anti-hunters or whatever it is, that all of those individuals have an equal likelihood of responding to your survey. And so just in terms of that sample and the whole issue of bias. And when we do that, when we do it right, we don't have to talk to all 600, 700,000 Vermont residents. We can take a true sample, a probability-based sample of your residents and come out with something that looks really close to what's really out there. George Gallup, sort of the whole sort of founder of survey research, says that, well, sampling public opinion is like sampling soup. One spoonful can reflect the taste of the whole pot if the soup is well stirred. You don't have to talk to everybody. So then the question is about importance of neutral or non-leading questions. And that's where you'll see in our survey, excuse me, do you support or oppose? Do you agree or disagree? Or please rate on a scale of 0 to 10. And so you do your best in terms of not eliciting a response. You're not one of those stupid people that thinks XXX or whatever it may be. And so let's keep things in perspective. So I was talking to a guy in Vermont who said, I see Malloy signs everywhere in my town. I see him everywhere. He's easily going to win because he has more signs than we do. Yeah, well, he didn't win, did he? And so the question is do all of those signs or all those people who come to your rallies or whatever it is, does that really reflect the reality and what's out there? Well, no. And you hear that every election. You're going to, everybody, oh, this guy has more signs. He's going to win. I see him everywhere. Well, he didn't. Again, not being political, just making, sort of bringing this whole thing to you. So I can also put some things in perspective. I can tell you that 7,000 Vermont residents don't think you're credible. 7,000 people. What if they all showed up on your doorstep and said, you stink, you're not credible? What if you got a letter from every single one of those individuals? Man, that's a lot of letters. That's a lot of phone calls. That's a lot of complaints. But let's put that in perspective. This is a survey question from the survey where we asked Vermont residents, how credible or not credible would you say the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department is in general? Well, you've got your 7,000. That's a lot of people, but it only represents 1% of your population. Now, I'm going to show this again, but the point here is just the whole perspective thing. A lot more people think you're very credible, over 300,000, and 145 think you're somewhat credible. And 50,000 people don't know anything about you. And so again, when you look in context, the whole point of this, the whole point of what I'm talking about here is keeping things in perspective. all 7,000 of these people probably have your all's name on their speed dial. And then sort of finally, the whole idea of not shooting the messenger. I can tell you as I started, I've been doing this a long time. I've never gotten more hate mail, and it's really sad, than when we did this trapping study, this one and one a few years ago. So I just, again, want to put that in perspective of you're dealing with something that's rough, and a lot of states don't have to deal with that. And it's really too bad that some folks have set up such an adversarial relationship, because it really doesn't have to be like that. So again, to put things in perspective, I just don't see this in a lot of different states. And so I think there are better ways to do it than some people slandering other people and things like that. I think it's kind of sad for a group of people to be doing that to professionals. So let's turn our attention now to the whole idea of understanding human dimensions and methodology and stuff. I'm going to drink some coffee here because it's late. And so what I want to do is sort of describe different methodologies. Things like, what are qualitative methods and how do we get that information? What are some quantitative methods to obtain human dimensions data? And then some things to keep in mind. So let's talk about qualitative methods. We do a lot of this, but qualitative methods are what I would call interpretation or descriptive types of methods. And let's talk about some of those. Public meetings. You all know a lot about public meetings, and sometimes they're required. A lot of the state agencies require you to have them. It's a law, and you're having them now. And they're really good ways to hear what people have to say and for you to face the public. And over the years, we've done literally hundreds of public meetings. And there's advantages and disadvantages to these, just like every single methodology. And as I said, many agencies are legally obligated to conduct these public meetings. What are the disadvantages? Well, you know what they are. They may not be representative. For some issues, people just don't come. They don't care about some things. And then for the higher salience issues, you get really high attendance. I mean, when we've done work in Alaska with salmon or Wyoming with wolves, you get hundreds of people. But is that representative out there? Well, generally what you do is you get sort of this concentration of people on one side and concentration of people on the other side. And the question is that representative? Well, there's been studies on this. This is a study that was done a few years ago. It was published in the Human Dimensions Journal, where they looked, and this was just one issue, but they looked at public opinion in the public meeting on this issue, and then did a scientific study and compared them. And they found that indeed it didn't, that those people who are coming to those public meetings don't represent what's out there in totality. Now, is it important for folks who come to these public meetings? Heck yeah. Is it important for board members to listen to them? Heck yeah. But you don't want to do a head count and say, okay, well, 70% think this and 20% think this and 10% think this. It's just, it's not a representation. They're important and you're legally obligated to do them, but it's not representative. We do a lot of things now called online public input forums, which are basically virtual public meetings. When we're doing strategic plans for agencies and stuff like that, we put up something, a temporary website, and we get some really cool information from people. And people might not be able to attend a meeting like this. They might not want to speak in public because they're shy or something. But you get some good information from that. And it's another good way, another good qualitative way to get good data. Focus groups. We've been doing focus groups since 1980. And they're fun. We used to travel a lot to do those. If you all are familiar with focus groups, generally it's 8 to 10 people behind a mirror. It's a one-way mirror. You get people who are observing those, and you talk about issues, but in very, very general ways. Generally, I'll start focus groups with maybe 8 or 10 questions. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? And you get people talking, and you listen. And you get lots of good information in terms of things that you never would have known about. 40 years ago, and we used to do work with fisheries managers, fisheries managers used to say, well, ask my license holders whether they want big fish or more fish, as if big fish or more fish were the only reasons people fished. Then you do a focus group and people would say, well, wow, I love being out on the water and I love seeing wildlife and I love being with my mom or dad or my kids and I love the naturalistic values. And so there's more to it than just sort of developing survey questions, and they're good places to start and understand and hear what people have to say. They're not quantified. I can't do a focus group and say 8 of these 10 people think this, therefore 80% of Vermont residents think that. But it's a way to get that public input. With COVID and stuff, the past 3 years or so, a lot of people have been doing those online. We just finished a really cool project for the Wildlife Management Institute on a study on language and what words matter to the public when we want to talk to them about issues related to wildlife. Some really interesting stuff. But again, you can't quantify stuff like that. What are the advantages of focus groups? We've been doing them a long time, we being the profession. They can, as I talked about, identify issues that aren't previously considered. Oh, wow. Huh. It's a heck of a way of seeing that. And then the other cool thing about focus groups is you get that group interaction. This guy says this woman says this, and all of a sudden these people start talking, and you can really see what happens in sort of the real world when people talk about issues that we're interested in learning about. Disadvantages is research is expensive because you have to pay those people to come. Sometimes you've got to pay them upwards of a couple $100s or more. And as I said, you can't quantify those findings. And then sort of this other way of sort of informally, qualitatively assessing what's out there are public stakeholder meetings on specific issues. And so that's sort of a quick overview of qualitative methods. And then human dimension specialists like me and lots of other people around the US do quantitative methods. And those are numbers based. It's measurable and it's repeatable. And there's a whole bunch of ways to get those. You can do mail surveys. You can do telephone surveys. You can do web-based surveys. You can do on-site internet surveys, or you can do what we call mixed mode. And I'll just go through each of those just to give you a little bit of a background on because you've heard about these and want to know more. A couple things to keep in mind. Methodologies are a means to an end. When people might say, oh, mail surveys are better than phone surveys, or internet surveys are better than this, or it's better than that. It's not this is better or this is better. It's really the question of, are these results representative of the population that you want to study? And what I mean by that is, if you have a sample that's biased to begin with, remember back when I went over to PETA, or if I went to a hunter's group or the Screaming Person, is that really representative of what's out there? And so the most important thing is that these methods that I'm going to talk about are a means to an end. Some are better than others, but the real issue is the sample representative of what's really out there. And we do this all the time. This is called probability-based sampling. And again, I don't have to interview all 700,000 people in Vermont, 6 million people, adults in Virginia here, to get a good sample. Remember, Gallup said if you stir that pot enough, you can taste a little bit of the chicken soup and know how the rest of the pot tastes. It's the representation of that. Is my sample good in terms of that? And this is why we use something called RDD, random digit dialing, and other things. But the other point that I want to make here is you do this all the time with wildlife. You don't go out there and you don't count every single duck. You don't count every single deer. You don't count every single turkey. The ways that we do things in the social sciences, in a lot of ways, are really parallel to what we do in wildlife. So let's talk about mail surveys. People might still get mail surveys. Less people do mail surveys. Academic folks still like to do them. Response rates are getting lower, and it's getting more expensive. We were involved with that wildlife value study, the Colorado State Wildlife Value Study, where we interviewed 53,000 people in a mail survey. It was huge. So it's a huge study. It was a multi-million-dollar study. There's some advantages and disadvantages, as there are to every single method. You can get great coverage because you can do what's called ABS sampling, address-based sampling. And so we know what every single household is, and we can do a random sample of that and send it out there. It doesn't require a large staff. A guy sitting in a university can do that. The other thing is you can use graphics or visual aids. So sometimes we have to do mail surveys because people are testing a campaign to educate people about water quality or whatever it may be. Disadvantages, there's going to be some bias because you do ABS, that address-based sampling. Generally, there's more males in that sample than there are females. So you get higher rates of males M-A-L-E in your male M-A-I-L survey. The other thing to always keep in mind with any kind of written survey is that there's a lot of people out there with literacy issues. Upwards of half the adults out there can read at like an 8th grade level. So, a lot of people who you deal with in situations like this are highly educated, very literate people. But when you start looking at populations as a whole, there's a chunk of people that just doesn't read very well. And that's important as well. Response rates have been dropping, and they can be pretty darn expensive. Literally, really expensive. The other thing is that they're sort of not as environmentally friendly as you want. When we do some of these big surveys that we are contracted to do, we have rooms full of, this is my home office, but in my office downtown, we have offices in there with stacks and stacks of papers. So some advantages and disadvantages. And this is just something I put together in terms of the exact same study done by mail and one done by phone. And you can see more males in the mail survey, less females. That's not representative. Ages, the male surveys, MAIL surveys, tend to get a lot older people. And then when you're doing things with hunting and fishing, those male surveys tend to overrepresent people who do hunt and fish. So again, that's where sort of that bias creeps in. Now you can account for this because you can weight that data, WEIGHT, and people do that all the time. Almost everybody weights their data, where you can apply some weights and data to those to bring them up, and it's accepted technique. It's totally fair to do, and people do that. But you don't want to start with a crappy sample and then weight it. Phone surveys, we've been doing phone surveys now for 35 years as well. In fact, every single night of the week for 35 years, except for Christmas, we're doing phone surveys, doing mail surveys, we're doing all these things, but nonstop for state agencies, for conservation organizations, NGOs. Some advantages, it can be quick. If an agency comes to us and says, man, we've got an issue here, we need information next week, you can get that. It achieves the best representative sample along with mail surveys. And, I just think they're more eco-friendly than mail surveys. Disadvantages. Well, there's a bunch of those too. Every one of these methods have advantages and disadvantages. They can be expensive, and they're becoming more and more expensive. Answering machines will kill you. It's hard to get through answering machines. The past couple of years, we've been able to get around that by texting, and that's pretty exciting. We did that with your survey. If we couldn't get somebody that they were selected to do your survey, and we couldn't get them because their answering machine, we could text them, and we got a bunch of those back through a text. And so now, oh, polls, they're not right. Well, they are. And there's some polls that aren't right. But if you look at it, the sort of the 538, Pew Research are really the two leading organizations that study the studies, if you will, are still, we can predict what's going to happen. There's some that go haywire, but in 2008, for the presidential election, they were able, as a community, were able to predict the way that every single state went in that 08 election when Obama won his first. In 2012, same thing, all but one state. 2016, that was a little bit of a surprise to some, but still the popular vote still had Hillary. 2020, literally every decent poll showed that Biden would win the popular vote. So are there some weird ones? Yeah, that come out. But generally about 85% to 90% of political polling, which is really hard to do, are very, very close. You know, and if you're talking 1%, you know, some of these cliffhanger states that goes 1 or 2%, you know, how do you do that when your sampling error is plus or minus 5%? So anyways, I like to joke that in 2020, some people hated Trump, some people hated Biden, but everybody hated polls. And so, but they're still very accurate when you do them correctly. People are starting to turn to web-based surveys, and we still do a lot of web-based surveys, especially in specific situations. I will tell you that when web surveys first started to come out, I was never a fan because of the representation. I published a paper called The Fallacy of Online Surveys. No data are better than bad data. So you can see where I started because they were bad. And let's talk about this. They're getting better. But the one thing I want to say is when we talk about online surveys, there's really a continuum of online surveys. So it's really unfair to say online surveys are good, online surveys are bad. If you want representation, you don't want to just slap something up on the web. How are we doing on your website? You know, you don't know what you're going to get. You have no idea. There's no representation. You don't know who's doing it. You don't know what they're doing. You don't know if the same person is doing that thing over and over because they're pissed at you or something. And so, you know, those aren't representative. Online panels where people can get paid for cash. Yeah. A database with partial emails. Chris told me that you have 80% of emails in some of your databases for hunters, say. That's not bad at all. And so in the future, we can talk about maybe doing some things online with those, although we still are seeing that hunters who answer surveys online tend to be much more avid than people who don't. So there's that sort of that bias interjection there. And so we supplement that through texting or phone. Online panels where respondents are contacted and invited. There's only about a handful. There's only about 3 or 4 panels, like if you've ever heard of Knowledge Panel from Ipsos, or some from the University of Chicago. NORC has an online panel where they actually contact people to invite them. They contact them through a mail survey or a phone survey, and then they recruit them to do surveys from there on out, and they get paid to do it. Those aren't bad. A database with full coverage. Heck yeah, if you hired me to do an employee survey and I had every single email, you're right on online or fine. And then web-based as well. If you're multimodal, and I'll talk a little bit about that, when you're supplementing, if you do a phone and supplement with web-based and mail, then yeah, they can be really good. But the point here is there's good methods and bad methods from online. And again, you have to be really careful of, are you getting what's really out there? And I talked about these. They're low cost, fast data collection. I had to laugh when I was developing this, and the disadvantages are everybody's an expert. I can ask questions. So I'm going to go do this survey, and I'm going to come back to the board and say, this is what people think. As we talked about for open-ended general population surveys, again, if they're not probability sampling, probably not good. And then what kills me on these is people say, I got a 90% response rate. It was like, well, you got a 90% of response rate of people who agreed to do your survey last week. So it's really not a 90% response rate. So then the question is, even if you get a firm who does these online panels and they say they're probability based, the question is, where do they get them from? Where do you get those people from? Well, you get them from doing what we did for you to begin with, which is the RDD phone survey and mail surveys. And so the question is who are the people, like if you do that, who are those people who are committing to long-term taking surveys? And then even worse than that is you're getting paid is, Do people really care about the issue? If they've done 50 surveys in a year, are they really paying attention to that survey? Again, when we do these things by phone, we know if people are, if they're a real person, they're not bots and those types of things. And then the worst, this is the worst of the worst, but just be careful of them because people are like, well, just do a cheap online survey. Well, there's things called click farms, mostly in Asia, where this photograph just blew my mind. This is a person who's doing surveys. They're doing your survey on what people think about XXX. Well, they're just making crap up, but they're getting paid for it. And it's called a click farm. And it's pretty scary. And so the point is that when you do these general population online surveys, you know, hopefully it's not this person doing your survey. Fun surveys, but expensive surveys are personal interviews or on-site intercept surveys. And these surveys are used when you can't get anybody any other way. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration used to use these for years of, if you're trying to get people who are using a certain dock to fish from, how do you get those people any other way than to go out and talk to them and intercept them? My employees hate these because I've had to send people to the Virgin Islands to interview boaters. I've had to send them to Panama City in Florida to talk about dolphins. And so, of course, I'm only kidding and saying that tongue in cheek and being silly about that, but they love them. If I have to send people down to the Virgin Islands, what's our next project, Mr. Judah? Well, I got to get some people to go down to the Virgin Islands to talk about coral reefs or coral reef management. So, but they're expensive. Think about how expensive they can be, but they're important. And personal interviews are an important part of survey methodology. The advantages are they're really good for personal interaction. The hard to get people. The disadvantages are, man, these things are expensive. Imagine trying to get people down there. Some of these people on some of these fishing surveys and docks and stuff, you know, they're waiting around all day long to interview 8 people. So they can get expensive. You also worry about something called acquiescence bias or interview bias, where the person likes the interviewer and they want to say the right thing and that type of stuff. So again, you asked me to talk about surveys and advantages, disadvantages of each, and I'm trying to do that. So, and then finally, mixed mode surveys. And this is where you sort of take the best of all worlds. And we do this. This is almost, if I'm doing a survey for you, you're fishing, you're hunters, you're in Florida, we just did one with their wildlife viewers or boaters, and you have a licensed database. Some of those people have emails and you want to get them by email, but their emails fail. And so we get sent back and we call people. Or if we can't get them by phone or by email or text, we send them a letter to get them. But the point here is that we get total representation from that population, if it's a known population. Again, this is only true with boaters, hunters, anglers, when you have that database. When I do a lot of membership studies for these conservation groups, you'll use this mixed mode approach. So the advantages are it achieves great coverage. You get really high response rate because if I can't get them one way, you get them another way. The disadvantages, again, high cost and it requires a lot of time. And then finally, in academic circles, people say, you know, does the method of impact a respondents' answers? That is are people going to answer differently if they get a mail survey versus a phone survey? There's some evidence to that I've seen, but usually it's only in degree and not not actual answers itself. I mean, you know, to take that thing in all the way to its end, you know, you call someone and say, who are you going to vote for? I'm going to vote for Trump. And they get a mail and they go, oh, I'm going to vote for Biden. And so, again, I just use these political examples because people can relate to them. So, again, you know, that we just don't really see that. We see it in degrees sometimes where people they'll say they're more strongly agreeing than moderately agreeing. So that's a whirlwind tour of who we are and some survey stuff. And hopefully y'all are like, wow, this is cool stuff. I said something that you didn't know, or I piqued your interest. But now what I want to do is talk about the whole public input process and things to keep in mind. Well, I alluded to this. Input at public meetings often does not reflect the actual attitudes and opinions of the public and or stakeholders. You know, there's research to show that. Are they important? Heck yeah, we need to be out there. We talked about Aldo Leopold at the beginning. Aldo Leopold is the reason you're sitting where you are. It was Aldo Leopold who said we have to set up citizens that are involved in making these important decisions for wildlife, and they need to be talking to the public and listening to the public. And public meetings should be part of any single state fish and wildlife agency that's out there. They're incredibly important, but they're not representative of what's out there. And one of the things you all never want to do is to have a big public meeting on a controversial issue and say, okay, everybody raise your hands. Everybody who supports it, raise your hands. Everybody opposes it, raise your hands. And I say that for two reasons. One is it locks you in. Two, it's not representative. So it's not a good idea to do, and I wouldn't do it. We talked about this. Online surveys often aren't representative. Some are and some aren't, but I gave you the advantages and disadvantages of each. Public forums are really important. With the ones that we do, these electronic town hall, you get phenomenal information from people. I mean, the public out there has such great ideas. I mean, this is just an example of something I heard an hour ago. We're doing, we do a lot of sort of what I call meat and potato studies. That is we help agencies identify, we're doing one right now in Washington on their crab harvest. Well, if you're going to manage Dungeness crab in Washington State, you need to know how many people are catching these crabs and how many they are and when they are and where they are. And so the agency, we collect all that information for the agency. And what we're doing now is they're actually legally obligated to send in a catch card. Well, you know what? Only about 40% of those people send that back in. So we call the people, we text them, you know, about what their rate of catch is, so that 40% doesn't bias what's really happening. And the question is are these people more or less likely to have caught more or less crabs? And so what we do is we not only interview them, but we ask for their opinions about how we can make that better. And some of the opinions that we're getting, that people are saying, oh, you're not ours, but the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife's website was down when I was trying to do it, or it was really difficult to navigate, or I didn't understand what they're saying here. So we can go back to the agency and say, here's some things that we can make this better. So while they're really important, they're not representative in terms of that quantified number we were talking about. Okay, this does not relate to you in any way, shape, or form. So I don't know why I put it in here. The loudest constituents may not always reflect the majority. Again, I don't want, the point is not that all, I mean, if people didn't have difference of opinions, I wouldn't have a job and I wouldn't have had a career. But I don't want you all to get swept into the loudest constituents thinking that they reflect the majority. The loudest constituents may not always reflect the majority. People on public meetings, online forums, emails to you, calls to you, tell a different story than probability-based random samples. And then the issue is, remember that scientific and non-scientific assessments of public opinion often paint a different picture. Now, again, I think public meetings, I think public input is really important. I think sitting in focus groups are important, and listening to every single person, all of your constituents who call you, who text you, and read you, are really important because they provide really good input. But there's a difference between people expressing their opinion and thinking everybody thinks that way and you should think that way, versus your stakeholders, your public, all 600,000 people that live in the state think. And I also, though, do think it's important to use that full range of research techniques to assess public opinion. And I don't want you to think, oh, just do surveys, because focus groups are important, public meetings are important, online forums are important. Now, they're non-scientific, but to hear that is important. But you have to put that in perspective of the scientific surveys that are probability based in what they're telling you. A lot of the state agencies are using citizens groups. And again, I think it's a really good idea. But where some of them have fallen down in getting scientific information is they'll say, okay, well, we have an issue that's important to a lot of people. And so we're going to get this person who's the head of this organization, and this person is the head of this organization, and this person is the head of this organization. So we're going to get them all together, and they're going to represent all the public and all the stakeholders out there. And I say, no, don't do that. That citizens groups are really important, but they're going to be a lot more effective, and you're not going to get led down a road that you don't want to get led down to if that group is data driven. And what I mean by that is we're working with a lot of state agencies now where there's a controversial issue, or maybe even just strategic planning. What are we going to do with our wildlife over the next 10 years? We're going to write an important plan. And so you get these people together, but you get them together and they're basing their discussions on quantitative survey research. If people are debating, and they're going to debate the survey that I present to you in a minute. One of the people who had talked said, whatever it was, their number 68% are opposed to trapping for recreational issues. But then that sort of cherry picked that survey because the other part of that is, well, 60%, 68% support trapping for a wildlife management project. Again, I don't want to get involved with policy right now, but my point is on citizens, I want you to have that debate. I want that person to be talking to this person and say, well, how do we rectify this? Yes, they think this, we think this. If people are talking and discussing important issues that people have deeply held values on, I want them to talk about it, but I want them to talk about it with some type of foundation, some type of scientific foundation versus somebody just coming and saying, everybody thinks the way we do, and therefore there should be no discussion. And that goes to both sides. Wow, I just talked to you a whole bunch, and we haven't even gotten to the survey. So I only am going to talk to you for a little while about this, just a sort of top level, but I know that you wanted to hear some results of this. So I've just given you a crash course in study methodology. Sorry, I've been kind of teaching some courses all day long. And so I'm just going to talk to you quickly about what we did for you on this study. As you know, it was a study designed to determine Vermont residents 18 years old and older, what they thought of the department, what they think about trapping in general in fur bearer species. We designed the survey instrument with the department based on other surveys that we've done with other states, as well as specific issues to the state of Vermont. It was a scientific probability-based survey, phone survey of people 18 years old and over. And again, it was the exact same methods of that Virginia Commonwealth, University of Virginia poll that I was telling you about in terms of Biden and then Governor Youngkin. We use both cellular phones and landlines. We know the proper proportions of that, and we match that exactly. We did do what we call a stratified sample because you wanted regional results. And simply what stratified means is that I'm not going to just survey the state as a whole because all your respondents would come from one small area, around the Burlington area. And then you wouldn't have enough to even talk about some of these other counties or regions. So we stratified at equal numbers and then put those numbers together. Now, when we put them together, we weighted it. So if region X, the central region, had 10% of your population, when we put that together, that was weighted at 10% or the exact proportions of it. We did weight some by age and gender, not a whole lot. I think we originally had, 53% female. We weighted that down to 52 or 51, whatever the Bureau of Census said. We have all those numbers and you weight it. When you look at the unweighted number versus the weighted numbers, it didn't change almost anything. I think a percentage point. So when we look at these, we talk about a 95% confidence interval, and the sampling error is about 3.5%, a little bit over 3%. So if I tell you 50% think something, it's really somewhere between 53.5% and 46.5%. It kind of that goes back. But again, some of these surveys using this methods, when you can get an election down to a percentage point, it's pretty amazing what you can do with only 800 completes. We did the survey in October. It feels like we just did it. What is it, January? So anyways, let's talk about attitudes toward the department. Overall, are you satisfied or dissatisfied with blah, 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 the department? Each of these was read as a governmental agency, or do you not know? We've talked a little bit about politics just in terms of political polling. These are numbers any politician would kill for. Having a negative of 5%, I mean, holy cow. I think if you said, we're going to give everybody $1,000, you're still going to get people saying, oh, I got to pay taxes on it. This stinks. Oh my God, this is terrible. And you're never going to get 100%. So, phenomenal numbers here. I don't love this number. I wish that was lower. And I know that you all are interested in that. And a lot of the state fish and wildlife agencies are as well. And we do a lot of work that people are calling it relevancy. And it's a huge orientation of state fish and wildlife agencies, the Wildlife Management Institute, the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, to bring more people into conservation and to provide different opportunities. So great numbers there. I want to come back in 5 years and do this again for you and have this come down to 10%. Okay, attitude toward trapping. And I want to, before I even get into this, I want you to focus on this one letter here. I didn't say attitude toward trapping. We're talking about attitudes, because one of the things you're going to see is things can move back and forth based on species, based on motivation. So there's no such thing as an attitude toward trapping. And anybody who says X% of Vermont residents think this about trapping is being superficial, because things are going back and forth and people hold very different values on a continuum of the use of animals. And so this is one of the first ones that we did in the survey, where we asked if they approved or disapproved of trapping. And now one of the things that you all were interested in, we were developing this, and you got this from me in talks in the old days. I mean, we're talking 30 or 40 years ago. People used to, do you support or oppose hunting? And people would say, well, I don't know. I don't support going to Africa and poaching a rhino. I don't support hunting. Well, that's not what you're talking about. You're not talking about illegal trapping. What is illegal trapping? It's poaching. What is illegal hunting? It's poaching. What is illegal fishing? It's poaching. What is going over the limit? It's poaching. And so over the years, we've used either legal trapping or we've used regulated trapping, because that's what we're talking about. If you wanted me to do a survey on poaching, I would say, do you support or oppose illegal hunting? Do you support or oppose illegal trapping? Now, I've heard people say, oh, you're using language to get a higher support. It's like, no, we're not. They're not doing anything like that. The point here is that I want people to be answering a question on what it is we're asking. But what we did want to see is if that held true in Vermont, and it does. When you use the term regulated trapping, you're going to get about 60% of residents supporting regulated trapping. If you don't, you're going to get about 42%. So words matter, but talking specifically about what you're talking specifically about is pretty darn important. How about the department? Well, you sort of already know this because I use this as an example. I mean, this is amazing. Literally 90% of residents are saying that you're credible and 1% doesn't. I mean, that's stunning. And I would like to see any other state agency in Vermont, any federal agency, any congressman, any other politician or anything get numbers like that. That's an amazing number. You should be proud of that number. And it's because of what you do. It's science-based conservation. It's listening to all the people who might not agree with you. That's a heck of a number, and you should be proud of that. So then the issue is not just big picture department-wide, but what about specific issues? And so here I tried to color code it. Where you're green, you're credible. Where you're red, you're not. Again, based on public opinion. Managing the deer population in the state, 89% either very credible or somewhat credible. Conserving biodiversity, 83%. Managing the moose population, 79%. Addressing human bear conflicts, 78%. Managing trapping in the state, 73%. The don't knows go up. And then managing hunting for bears with dogs, don't knows go up, and your credibility on that issue goes down, and not at all credible goes up to 13%. Over the years, people have asked me, what's a bad number? Again, you want zeros on everything here, but generally you don't have to wait until 50% say you're bad or whatever. Generally, your danger point is from 20 to 30%. If you're heading up toward 30% on not credible or some of these issues, you're going to have issues. Okay, so we found out in terms that about 60-ish% support trapping overall. But what about different reasons to trap? And again, this is where the young lady said the number here on trapping for recreation, and that's true. That a large percentage of Vermont residents do not support trapping for recreation. On the other hand, and on this continuum, is trapping to relocate wild animals where they're abundant to where they once existed. Trapping to control certain wildlife populations so they do not become too numerous. Again, high levels of approval here. And again, you can see what's happening. Trapping to get food, higher levels. Americans relying on it for subsistence, higher levels. Trapping as part of a biological study, higher levels. Trapping to reduce crop damage, well, you're starting to creep up there, 22%. Trapping to reduce damage to human property, getting a little bit higher up there. And then down here, reasons to make money for fur clothing and recreation, you're getting higher numbers. Now, again, all I can say here is you're going to see both sides of this issue, and it's too bad we have to take sides because the truth is we all care about wildlife management and wildlife conservation. There's not one person here that's listening to me that doesn't care about animals and wildlife. That's why we do this. That's why you do this for free, board members. People are doing this out of caring. This is why the people who are listening to me on Zoom or came is because they care about it. They're not getting paid either. They care about wildlife. And so what we don't want to do is get into this cherry picking here of, wow, everybody supports it, everybody opposes it. And so again, what I'm trying to do in this survey is sort of enlighten everyone in terms of reasons that people do support trapping, high levels here versus people down here, high levels oppose. And so we can use this data, I think, to start coming to some issues and some policy issues that take into account everybody's attitudes, but also benefit wildlife and conservation itself. How about in terms of their attitudes toward trapping and the factors that affect it? And again, we tried to dig into this where we have high levels of agreement on some things and high levels of disagreement on others. Well, people who agree that regulated trapping is okay if the animals are accidentally caught can be released. The young lady who had her dog in a trap, that broke every single person on this call and in this meeting's heart. I think regulated trapping is okay if the animal dies quickly. You get 61% agreement. Even though trapping is regulated by the state, regulated trapping can still cause wildlife species to become endangered or extinct. Well, that's a factual question. And we know in the wildlife management profession that when trapping is regulated, that it has not resulted in species becoming extinct. Maybe 150 years ago or 100 years ago, but that's, with state fish and wildlife agencies now, that is not the case. Because of improvements in trapping is humane today than it was years ago. The issue of humaneness is totally subjective. I mean, there's, how do you quantify something like that except for people's opinion? And you can see that split there with a lot of people don't knowing. Is that? It's getting late. Sorry, I've been talking all day. Endangered species are frequently used to make fur clothing. Well, it's illegal. And most people in Vermont are like, well, no, they're not. How about different species? I've talked to you about how attitudes can sway back and forth based on the motivation. And again, those are all important to talk about. Everybody here has probably read Animal Farm by George Orwell. Remember where he says all animals are created equal, but some are more equal than others. Darn true in Vermont. Some people feel comfortable with trapping some species and higher levels trapping other species. And so again, when you see these color codings, I tried to use a continuum that people would understand. If people think there's a strong plus a moderate need, you can see high levels of support for trapping beaver, 65%, coyote, 41 and 21%. And you've got a lot of people, 16%, disagreeing with that, and a lot of people don't knowing. Skunks, raccoon, bobcat, otter, fox, and fisher. So again, when we talk about trapping, I mean, how complicated can this be? It depends on the species. It depends on motivation. It depends on a number. It depends on people. In the report itself, in the survey report itself, we cross-tabulated out your publics. Men think different than women. Different ages think different. People in urban areas think different than more rural areas. It can become complicated, and hopefully this report can shed some light on that. Do they support or oppose regulated trapping to manage those same species? Again, you can see high levels of support for trapping beaver, for skunk, for raccoon, coyote, and then you can see the negatives starting to play with hawk, otter, fisher, and then bobcat. So again, it becomes fairly predictable. I probably could develop a statistical model if people were to sort of put all of these together. But again, hopefully this survey sheds light on how people think about an issue that you have to deal with. And so blah, 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 we can turn this off. And I hope I didn't talk too much, but you did ask me to talk. So you got it. And I stopped screen sharing, and okay, and there you are. So I can't say anybody, hopefully we didn't have too many people fall asleep. I can tell you that one time I did a study, I did a presentation in Johannesburg, South Africa. And I had a guy who was talking and I couldn't use the clicker for the slides that it was at the time. And so he had to click the slides for me on his laptop. And I was talking, and we all had flown over from the States over to Johannesburg. If you've ever been on that 25-hour flight, it's brutal. And I looked at the guy and he was falling asleep. So hopefully I didn't put too many people asleep. But I really appreciate being allowed to address you. I appreciate being able to do work for you now for the past 25 years or so. I really commend you all for what you're doing. You're doing exactly what Aldo Leopold wanted to happen as a citizen group, coming in and all caring about conservation and quite frankly, having as difficult a job as it can be to deal with some of these issues, because you're dealing with issues of very high salience for people. People care about conservation. They just care about it in different ways. And so you can see that even with just one issue that you're dealing with, trapping, how incredibly complicated that this can be. So with that, hopefully you learned something about some methodologies and why people do what they do. And be glad to stay on as long as you want and answer questions. And I wouldn't be offended if you told me to go away either. So I throw it back to Mark or Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mark. I'll turn it over to the chair and Mr. Chair too. I give him the time too. I know that we can communicate more with Mark too. Board members have questions later following up. They submit it to us. We'll make sure that we get that response back to the member and share it with all board members.
Sure, okay. All right, well, thank you very much, Mark. That was very enlightening to understand really what went into the data that we're going to eventually see here from the department. I'm assuming there's a write-up with those charts, so that will give us also.
Yes, sir. Full report. 150 pages of every chart and graph, every piece of data sliced and diced by general population, by each of your regions, by demographic group.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for Mark? I have a quick one. I'll ask just a quick one first. It's more a generic question. And I know you tried to touch on it, but that's a lot of information. And it's a lot of good information. But just generally speaking, the challenge is always interpreting it correctly. Yeah. And how much of an expert do you have to be to interpret it correctly? Which, we don't have that expertise. So that's why I think the report is very important for us. So my concern about surveys in general is just the right interpretation. And is there a correct interpretation to that data? Or are there multiple interpretations to that data that could be accurate?
I think that there are definitely correct and incorrect interpretations of the data. The biggest concern I have is people cherry picking that data, picking one thing out and saying, everybody opposes it, everybody supports it. It's just not black and white. You're dealing with a complex issue. And so I think it's not interpretation. I think the issue is understanding what we're presenting in totality. That's the important part here.
Okay, thank you. Any other board members? David, were you thinking?
I'll hold, because we'll be getting the report. At that point, I
Anybody else?
would probably have some questions.
Okay, if not, thank you very much. Again, it was
Thank
very
you.
helpful and,
Good presentation.
Very
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Bye.
okay. Do we have pizza or something tonight or not?
We have better.
Just
We have
curious.
better than pizza.
Pick it up.
All right, is the time right? Okay, the time is right, okay. So we're gonna take a brief break, a little food break, and we'll, be back here at, 7 o'clock, 5 after 7. Yeah.
Yeah, Tasha, somebody
Yeah.
Like, that's not. Right. But nice. Yeah.
Sorry. We need to make note.
Oh, we done. It is, it's noted right here.
Right here.
There too.
No, we can never go back to pizza.
Absolutely right.
By the way, I said that there was a week where, I forget what we had a board meeting and we had something else. I had pizza 3 nights in a row and I said, that's it. No more pizza.
Wait for it.
It's like I made tomato soup last night with milk. Then my wife tells me after, she's like, just the milk's bad. I'm like,
Little late.
tasted, that was in tomato soup.
Same thing happened to me last week. Last week, my wife says, "You have the office this morning." I'm home. I think she's, goes, I said, yeah. What you was to put creamer in it? I said, how was it? Look at my copy. It kind of curdled. I said, well, why did you put it back in the refrigerator? She said, I have this stuff. She said, I didn't notice it until I got in the car. That's what she said. I said, no, I didn't notice it, but it was gone. I mean, we got rid of it.
I could even send you some.
Makes you stronger.
Yeah, I guess. Okay. Just sitting there, nobody.
No one.
Okay. I guess we're good to go here. There's Dave right there.
You're up.
Excellent.
Yeah. Yep. I haven't been out there, so then it's a lot of undercurrents with Magog, so be careful with ice. And then there's a lot of, we're not going, my son. Yeah, no, we're not going. Yeah. We've got a lot of full temps, but yeah, exactly. Those couple of nights kind of sure formed up pretty good. But because there's an undertow, there's always right crash. Some of the really. The cracks come up. Yeah. This.
I'm not sure if we are on or not. Yes, we are on. Okay, Nick, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So, all right, why don't we get going here? The next item on the agenda is from Nick Horton. And Nick will be giving us an overview of the 2022 deer hunting season. So Nick, take it away.
All right, thanks. So do you all have the 1-page summary handout? Okay. I'm going to share my screen just for the benefit of people online that may not. But
Can you hear that okay, Dave? Can you hear that? Okay?
Watch on here.
All right. Hopefully you can all see that now. I'm just going to run through this quick broad overview, and then if anyone has any quick questions, I'll answer those. But first, these are preliminary numbers. They have already changed since I made this document. I fully expect us to get somewhere in the order of 50 to 100 additional rifle season reports. Just reports we're trying to chase down from certain reporting stations. But anyway, otherwise it's not going to change a ton. We're going to end up right around 17,500 deer, total deer, 9,600, maybe closer to 9,700 bucks, which is a little above the last 3 years. pretty good, one of the better years we've had, even in the last 5 or 6 year span. Antlerless harvest is up a fair bit from last year, but actually kind of on par with where we've been in recent years. Right about where we wanted to be. As far as individual seasons go, biggest story was archery. That'll be our second highest ever archery harvest, behind only 2020. It's sort of a mixed bag of, I'm not sure if that's, I don't like the inconsistency we've seen over the last 3 years, the big swings we've seen. I'm okay with having a high harvest, but I don't like to go from 4,500 to almost 6,000 from year to year. Youth season continues to kind of slowly decline. Our October muzzleloader season was up considerably better than last year, than 2021. But December made up for that. And when you combine the two, we ended up with one of our lower muzzleloader harvests in recent memory. The last time we had a muzzleloader harvest that low was when we only issued, we actually issued fewer than 10,000 antlerless permits. So not real good on the muzzleloader front, but overall, I have to say it was a pretty good year. You know, I haven't heard a lot of complaints other than the usual stuff. So I think all in all, a pretty good year. Well, I'll leave it there. And if anyone has any quick questions, I don't really have much data other than this.
The December muzzleloader, that is buck and doe?
Yes, that's bucks and does. Yeah. I believe there were about 500, maybe 550 bucks in that.
Do you know when you'll have a breakdown of the age structure of harvest?
We should have age results. We're supposed to get them at the end of March. So probably when we do our antlerless harvest recommendation in April, we'll have some age breakdowns.
Oh, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I'm curious. My whole thing here has changed. I'm curious why certain areas of the state had a decline. Was that lack of participation, or it was tougher hunting, or you getting any anecdotal feedback?
Generally speaking, I guess I could put that back up for folks who don't have it.
And I'm
handy.
particularly interested in the southeastern corner of the state where it's dropped 8%, where I continue to hear about overbrowse.
Yeah, as a general rule, anything, I mean, 10% you might start to think is actually something going on. Anything less than 10% one way or the other can just be seasonal, you know, hunting weather during the hunting season, food availability, weird things like that may have nothing to do with deer numbers or even hunter effort. You know, there seems to be a pattern in the Connecticut River Valley, both J82 and O were down. The kind of Bennington County area seemed to be down. That probably means something, but what exactly caused that, I can't say. And then on the other hand, you know, a lot of the northeastern WMUs were up, especially in Essex County. And that probably had as much to do with having good snow conditions as anything else. So I don't know that we can read in a lot into any of these changes.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple questions, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Based on your comments at the start of your presentation, I was gonna ask a question about the archery season. What you attributed to 33% increase kill to, but it doesn't sound like you have an answer to that. Is that correct?
I don't know if we'll ever have an answer. My, the big piece of archery that we don't know is the effort, the hunter effort side of it. We've seen a big swing from 2020, a high in 2020 of over 6,000 to only 4,400 in 2021, and then back up to almost 6,000 this year. Given the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic, that might be effort related as much as anything else. The other thing I will say though is I mentioned conditions, weather conditions, food availability being important. We actually had decent weather in October, especially in early October. It was seasonably cool. That's a big help for hunters. And then there was a terrible natural food year. So deer were coming out to fields or food plots, right, and that really helps archery hunters as well. So those were definitely factors, but that much of a factor, I have to think effort was also at play.
Sure. Thank you. My other question, is there any data on the number of antlerless buck killed during muzzleloading season? Buck that have dropped their horns and.
Not necessarily whether they've dropped their horns or not. Someone would have to write that as a note on the harvest report. Right. And unfortunately, depending on the station, some of them get reported as does. Because the station doesn't know how to report them correctly. But as far as we know, it's very rare.
Really?
Definitely happens, but it's rare.
Thank you.
Good question. Okay.
Any disease, any CWD or anything like that seen this year?
No. I mean, we still haven't detected CWD. We had no EHD, no episodic hemorrhagic disease this year, although it was in the region. So no disease issues this year. Deer seem to be doing well on that front.
This is more of a light question, and I'm not sure if you're the right person to answer this. How did we do license sale wise for the seasons?
I suspect Chris Saunders can probably answer that better than I can.
It was down 10 percentage points, but compared to fishing, it was pretty stable. Particularly archery, obviously, and just regular hunting and combination sales. Interestingly enough, our reprints from our lifetimes, we probably hit the breaking point where we have more youth hunting with lifetime licenses than are actually purchasing licenses. But in general, it's pretty healthy.
And my only reason for asking is as much interested in terms of, how many hunters we have that are generating these numbers versus, last year and the year before. That's all.
He has his hand up, if you could mention it again.
Brian, if you have a question, could you unmute yourself, please?
I do. Hi, Nick. I have two questions. One, do you think, let's see if I can make that one work.
Hi.
Do you think that the crossbow regulation has increased the number of archery deer?
I'd have to say, while we don't know, I think it certainly is. It has very likely increased participation in archery, and maybe the amount of time archery hunters have and spend out in the field. I don't know that it's increased the number of people who archery hunt. But yes, it probably has been a factor.
The other thing is, was there any incidences of EHD this year?
No, we had no cases. Everyone around us pretty much did, but we didn't have any.
That's good news. Thank you.
Other questions for Nick? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Nick.
All right.
Appreciate
Thanks
it.
all. See you.
Thank you.
Okay, next item of discussion is the presentation of the proposed revisions to the bait fish regulations and possibly for votes.
So I'll introduce the director of our fisheries division, Eric Palmer, who will lead this discussion and probably hand it off to some staff.
Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner. Just wanted to give a little bit of background. I'm Eric Palmer, Fish Division Director. We typically come in front of the board every other year with fish regulation changes under the general fish reg, what's called section 122. And in front of the board every 4 years with bait fish regulation changes under a separate section 141. The board made some significant changes to bait fish regulations 4 years ago, took effect 3 years ago. And made some really big changes to the general fish regs 2 years ago that took effect last year. And because of that, we're coming to you with very few changes this round. We've got a few minor changes we're recommending to the bait fish regulations, and we don't have any changes we're recommending for general fish reg. We mostly want to let the dust settle. Anglers seem to be quite happy with the changes that the board has made already. We're hearing very few complaints on bait fish regulations, and we had only a few minor changes proposed for the general fish regulations, and we didn't want to stir the pot. We didn't want to come before the board with really minor changes when we just made really big sweeping changes 2 years ago. So Margaret Murphy is one of our fish program managers. She covers the western half of the state and then statewide for certain issues, and he has picked up the bait fish regulation revision process. Formerly Adam Miller had done that, but he's actually changed departments since then. And so Margaret will give you an overview of the few proposed changes for bait fish regulations, which if everybody says, yep, that makes sense, we're hoping we can take a first vote tonight to get the rulemaking process started. Then separate from that, once we're done with bait fish, Sean Good is going to give a presentation on a test water that we're trying on Chittenden Reservoir for walleyes. That's next on the agenda. If folks have any general questions about fish regs, I'm happy to answer them, but otherwise we'll turn it over to Margaret to give you the bait fish proposal.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I am plugging the logged here, so hopefully you can all hear me all right. I feel like I'm in a tunnel. Go right to the first slide. So, yeah, so Eric kind of gave you some background. So 141 is the bait fish regulations. They were pulled out separate. Bait fish is a whole piece on its own. And the idea of the regulations is to provide opportunity while also reducing risk. So it's finding that balance, allowing people to harvest fish, ice fish. Usually a lot of bait fish is, it's very popular in the winter, ice fishing. So allowing those opportunities while still reducing risk to non-native species and different fish pathogens. As Eric mentioned, there were significant changes that took effect in 2020, where anglers seem to be pretty happy with those. We have heard a lot of complaints. They seem to be happy with them. They're able to harvest their own bait. We have the 2 zones now. We have the restricted, the blacklisted waters. So we're only going to propose some minor changes that will take effect January 1st of next year. And we're still evaluating, but we really want to get the anglers used to what they are now. Again, this will be the 3rd year they're into them. So they're still understanding what they can and can't do. So we got our team together in September of 2021. At this point. So we met over the course of about 12 months, really kind of dove into the regulations, discussed potential changes. We then proposed some changes to the rest of the fish division. Went through those and then essentially came to the conclusion that we're really wanting to make only some minor changes. And some of the other more major changes might wait till later, that we need to still kind of think through it a little bit more in the detail. So we're coming to you this year with just very minor changes that the whole fish division is on board with. Next. So I'm going to run through them for you. There's only 3 that are the most significant. So the biggest one is to change the name of the blacklisted waters. Again, blacklisted is becoming an unfavored term. So we want to recognize that and come up with a better name. So we all decided on restricted water, which really defines what it is. Eric?
Can you just give a little background on why we call them blacklist or restricted water?
Why?
Yes, I was,
Maybe it's on your next slide.
well, it's not, I was gonna get into that next. So the idea of a blacklisted water are those waters that are more susceptible to non-native species or potential pathogens, Lake Champlain, Lake Bombazine, Lake Memphremagog. There's 7 of them.
Connecticut River.
Connecticut River. So those, you can't move bait fish off of those. Once you used it on that water body, it has to stay there. Because we don't want to transport the water or the fish to the water body that doesn't have the same potential for those non-native or invasive pathogens and fish species. So those came up. Those were described. There's specific receipts. So if you buy bait fish from a commercial dealer and you say, I'm going to fish on Lake Champlain, you get that on your receipt, and that is the only place you can use those fish. And if you harvest on one of those blacklisted waters, you can't remove anything from that water body. Again, balancing that opportunity and risk and making sure that we're not moving pathogens or other fish species around to water bodies that we don't want them in. The second one is somewhat minor in section 8. It lists the approved species for use of bait. There's 8.1, which lists a bunch of minnow species. 8.2, 3, and 4 list different species. One of them is rainbow smelt, the other is bluegill, pumpkin seed, rock bass, and yellow perch, and then Lake Champlain, alewife, and white perch. If you click one more time. Right now, it just says they can only go open water or ice fishing. We want to clarify that in mind. So we're specifying the method as well, just to make that. So those species in those 3 sections can only be harvested by hook and line. And one more. And then the last section, section 12, right now is called use of fish as bait, which this is a little confusing because it's actually water bodies where the use of fish as bait is restricted or not or prohibited. So we want to make that title much more clear. And also that list, the biologist went through that and have recommended removing 1 and adding 5 different. These water bodies are ones where the brook trout pond. So we want to make sure that those stay that simple fish community and don't want people trying to harvest fish or using other fish in those waters where many of those big species aren't found currently. So those water bodies, the biologist had looked through it and said, here's these waters. We don't want any bait fish on it. All right, so
Just,
pretty minor, yes.
why did you drop the pond, McIntosh Pond, out of the list? Any particular reason?
That's right, Sean.
The ponds that were dropped were mostly dropped because those other species are already back in them. That they were claimed at some point to just be trout.
Right.
And over the years, other species have been reintroduced, so it doesn't make sense to prohibit the use of bait fish anymore in some
Yeah,
of those
unless you're gonna
ponds.
try and resurrect the pond. Yeah.
Right.
But again, we've removed one and added 5.
Yeah,
So-
no,
so
I,
we have some waters out there that we've identified as well. So the next part of the process, so everybody should have received the actual red line strikeout document of 141, which shows those changes. There's a couple other minors. We updated the genus and species of the northern red belly dace. That's it. So the idea here is if everybody's in agreement, we do the first vote, that passes, that will then initiate the rulemaking process. And for those not familiar, it's listed out here, it's multiple steps. So once that process starts, we file with ICAR. That for us, and with the Secretary of State. Also post it online and publish it in the newspapers. We'll then hold public hearings. Right now, we're thinking about 2, one in person and one virtual. Well, then, following that, it will then come back to all of you for a second vote. If it passes that, it then gets filed with LCAR. And again, come back here for the third vote, and then it will get filed. The final rule we filed with the Secretary of State. Again, with the notation that these would go into effect January 1st.
Quick question. Clarifying the line and hook change, is that just more of a presentation change, or was there actually something, an action that you're trying to correct that you had no method to address it?
I don't think there was any issues that we've identified. We just wanted to make sure if we're going to make some of these minor changes to make sure that method was clear. And a couple of people on our team that are avid ice anglers and use a lot of bait, so they kind of know the intricacies of some of these, which was
well, isn't it also that a lot of people get bait by throwing nets?
Right,
You're saying this can't be done.
There's legal methods to collect the other bait fish species that include using minnow traps, using seines. But for those species that Margaret mentioned, like the alewife, white perch, yellow perch, pumpkin seed, can only be caught hook and line. Then on certain water bodies, you can then use them as bait. But you can't catch them with a seine or a minnow trap.
A net, yeah.
Yeah, so it was just a clarification. I think anglers already knew that, and we weren't feeling that there was a lot of confusion about that, but we just wanted to make it clear in the actual language of the rule.
Well, even though I kind of like blacklisted waters, I'll move to approve the rule for the first reading, Mr. Chairman.
Second the motion.
And I first, a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor of moving the rule, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Let's have it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Aye.
Okay. Next on the agenda, Eric, you and your team again. Presentation on test water designation for Chittenden Reservoir walleye.
Yeah, so I wanted to give a little background. John Good is our fish biologist from the Rutland area and has been managing Chittenden Reservoir for quite a while. The presentation we're making is on a test water designation. It's not a board rule. You don't have to actually do anything tonight, but it's our way to try changes, see if they have the desired effect biologically and recreationally. So this is a presentation on changes that John recognized as changes in the reservoir that he felt we needed to respond to. And this is the way for us to try test water. We don't call it a regulation because if it's a regulation, then it has to go through formal rulemaking. And that process that Margaret just laid out, consuming and expensive. And we don't know if this will work or not. So it's a way for us to gather data and then come back to the board if we feel something worked. If it's a complete failure, we eliminate it, go back to the existing regulation. Sometimes we tested a couple different lake trout regulations on Little April. I don't think any of the board members were around back, well, maybe it's anglers back then. But usually we do these just long enough to see if there's a response from the fish population and the anglers so that we can say, yes, it's working, or no, it isn't. And if it is working, then we bring it to the board as a proposal like we would with any other regulation. We did in the proposed changes for 122. And Sean will go into some of the actual statute.
Was that process also used on the bat and kill?
Yes, it is. We tried it on the bat and kill as a test water, and then when it seemed to be
Working.
yeah, we brought it back to the board and it became a actual board regulation.
But does this carry the same weight as a regulation from an enforcement perspective?
It does. We post on site. It is enforceable. It's basically under the authority of the commissioner initially, as a test water. We do put it into our digest. So we made this change after our 2023 digest had already got the print, but it'll be in the 2024 digest. And by statute, we're required to post on site at, in this case, Chittenden Reservoir, at any angler access points, post what the test water designation is.
Welcome, Sean.
All right, well, Eric just scooped 3/4 of my presentation. I'm gonna go straight to the questions. So, yeah, you can go to the next slide, Alex. So I did have a few slides here in the background for everybody here, just so you know what a test water designation is. And most of you are probably new since the last time we did one. I have a past board member in the back, Justin, who actually lives on Chittenden Reservoir. He's familiar with them, but as Eric said, this is not a board regulation. It's a designation where we are attempting to evaluate some sort of test water, some change in management action on the on a specific body of water to see if it works, to achieve the goals or objectives that we've set, to address something that we might see as a need in fisheries management. It gives us the ability to implement those changes quickly. Normally it takes a year to a year and a half to get things through the board and APA process. This thing I wrote at the end of November, and it was in effect on January 1st. So, we can do it much quicker. There are some requirements that come along with statute 4142, as Eric mentioned. We have to publicly notice our intent in at least three times in the newspapers. And we have to post it all around the reservoir at all common and conspicuous access points. And that's what the first slide was showing. It can go backwards, maybe one alley. So this is the signs that we have around Chittenden Reservoir right now. Has a statutory authority on it, has what the restrictions are that we're evaluating, and it has the date. Go forward now, please. Thank you. These are meant to be temporary. Again, as Eric said, this is an evaluation. We see some issues on Chittenden Reservoir that we want to try to address. We don't know if they're going to work. It's very cumbersome to go through the long board and APA adoption process only to find out that it didn't achieve what we were trying to do. So we set a time period. Sometimes it's as little as 4 years. This one is set for 8 currently. Doesn't mean we have to keep it for 8 as a test water. And we will be doing regular routine assessments over the next few years to sort of monitor the success or lack of in what we're doing. Next slide. Just so you know, this is not unique, as one person has already pointed out. We do this in the past. The bat and kill was one example. We currently have 3 other test water designations on the books right now. around the state. We have Berlin Pond, not far from here. We have Stiles Pond in the Northeast Kingdom. We have the Deerfield River. So these are ongoing evaluations with certain restrictions that differ from the general regs that the waters were under initially. And this is just a screenshot of our website. You can go to this website here, click on those links, and it will give you the same document that I provided as a handout in the package that gives you the background and justification of why those are under test water designation currently. Next slide. All right, so a little bit of background for people who don't know what Chittenden Reservoir is and what we're trying to do there. So it's about a 758 acre impoundment. It's an artificial reservoir, sort of high up in the Green Mountain National Forest. This is a photo of Chittenden Reservoir. It's got a hydroelectric dam on it operated by Green Mountain Power. And because of that, it gets a pretty large drawdown in the wintertime. They draw it down 25 feet. Sometimes it's more than that. And that's because they're trying to make room for capacity from snow melt off the mountains in the springtime, so they don't overtop the dam. So they draw it down quite a lot in the wintertime. That kind of causes a little bit of havoc with the ecosystem a lot because it dewaters large areas of the reservoir. The whole shoreline becomes dewatered. That prevents aquatic vegetation from becoming established, which kicks off primary productivity, supports bait fish, provides habitat, that kind of stuff. So it's kind of a low productivity system. Doesn't have a lot of nutrient input. It's just not very productive. In the 70s and 80s, the department spent a lot of time, like we did pretty much everywhere in the state at that time, focusing almost exclusively on trying to get trout or salmon to grow there. We even moved smelt and stocked them in there to try to provide forage for the salmon. The smelt never really took off because they didn't have anything to eat. There's really no plankton. So that was kind of a failure after multiple species being tried over time. But what did happen was that yellow perch got in there at some point, and without any predators, they kind of exploded. They became overabundant. There was millions of perch in there, and they were all very stunted. They were small. They didn't have good growth rates. They didn't have anything to eat. I mean, a big perch there was 6 inches. And so they were basically just overpopulated and small. Next slide, Allie. Thanks. So in 1993, another biologist in the Rutland district, who's since retired, had the idea to stock walleye in the reservoir. And one of the reasons is because walleye is a known predator of yellow perch. It's one of walleye's preferred forage foods. So there was really 2 objectives at the time. The main one was try to, tweak the yellow perch population by thinning them out, allowing the remaining perch to get a little bit bigger and provide a fishery for larger sized perch. The secondary benefit of that would have been, it would have been a new walleye population. And those are kind of rare around the state. Anglers do like fishing for walleye. There are no walleye fisheries in southern Vermont in inland lakes. So it would have had the added benefit of providing a recreational walleye fishing opportunity. And one of the objectives of that was to hopefully have them take off on their own, stock them for a little while, have them start reproducing and become self-sustaining on their own. So those were really the 2 goals of putting them in there in 1993. At the time, we were just getting our walleye culture program up and running at in our hatcheries, and we had 3 rivers that we were taking eggs from for stocking back into Lake Champlain. That was the Poultney River, the Winooski River, and the Missisquoi River. So a portion of the eggs from each of those runs that we collected for stocking back into Champlain were diverted to Chittenden Reservoir. So that reservoir now is a mix of genetics from those 3 rivers. Around 2009, we started thinking that the walleye population was looking pretty good in Chittenden Reservoir. Maybe we could start taking eggs from them up there itself. And so in 2011, we tried it. And we were pretty successful. We found a lot of mature spawning size walleye. And so we stopped taking eggs out of Champlain. And we started taking them directly from walleye that were surviving and living in Chittenden itself. was also around the time, 2008, that we started getting worried about viral hemorrhagic septicemia. And we changed our whole stocking strategy where Ed Weed Fish Culture Station was no longer going to be able to put fish from that were growing on Champlain water into any inland waters, and Chittenden fell into that category too. So next slide. All right, so during that period of time, when walleye were first started being stocked in there, test water designation was implemented at that time as well. So from 1997 to 2002, this regulation or designation was in place. Basically, it's what we had up until the end of 2022. Minimum length limit of 22 inches, 2 fish per day, and a little bit of a different season, June 1st, all the way through to the following March 15th, the closed season from March 15th, March 16th until the end of May. The reason why the minimum 22-inch length limit was put in place was because it was felt that those walleye needed time to grow to a larger size instead of being susceptible to harvest at 18 inches, which is what the state-wide regulation would be, so that they could feed on yellow perch longer before they were, prone to being harvested by an angler. Give them that a few extra years where they can continue feeding on yellow perch, thin those out, and then also get to the age and size at which they'll start spawning themselves. So they get a couple of years of reproduction out of them before they're become susceptible and vulnerable to angler harvest. In 2005, that test water designation was, it felt like it was being successful, so it was moved through the board process and adopted. It replaced the test water designation in 2005, and it's been that way ever since. Next slide, next bullet. So, during that time, both before it was converted to a board reg and after, we have been doing a lot of evaluations and assessment up there, just monitoring the progress of that fishery, see if it's providing the opportunities that we wanted it to for anglers. So we do a lot of different things. We go up there in the spring, we electrofish around the reservoir, and we look for spawning concentrations of walleye. We found some places where they seem to stack up, and we can get them pretty easily in April when they're spawning and doing their thing. We collect data from those fish at that time, which gives us the size structure. We sex them, we measure them, we weigh them, we get a relative abundance, and it helps us just kind of monitor the growth and status of that population. Next bullet. In the years that we stocked for quite a long time every year, and then we went to an every other year stocking. We put between 15,000 and 45,000 2-inch fingerlings or so on the end of the reservoir on the years we stocked. Every one of those fingerlings that came out of our hatchery were marked in a way that we could recognize later. Same thing goes for the Champlain walleye. So this picture up top are fall fingerlings, in November, basically. We go out, we do a survey, again with electrofishing along the shorelines. We look for these fish that's somewhere between 4 and 8 inches in length. And we bring them back to the lab, and I pull a bone out of their head, and I look to see if those fluorescent yellow rings are on that bone. And that tells us that if it is, it came from our hatchery. That's a fluorescent dye called oxytetracycline, which we mix into a tank of water. We put the fish in there for about 6 hours in the hatchery before a couple of days before they're stocked. That bone only glows like that when I look at it under a microscope with special fluorescent light sources. But that tells us we go out in the fall, we collect 40 or 50 of these 5-inch, 6-inch walleye. How many of those have this mark and how many don't? Up until 2021, every fish I looked at, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, always had the mark. We never saw any evidence of natural reproduction. In the years that we went from annual stocking to every other year stocking, we continued doing this in the fall, even in the years when we did stock in the spring. And we shocked the same areas for the same amount of time around Chittenden Reservoir looking for 5-inch, 6-inch walleye, and we never found any. So it seemed to indicate to us that successful reproduction was not happening. Next slide. So the last thing we do up there regularly, have done for a long time, is to evaluate the success of our other objective, and that was to see if yellow perch abundance decreased and size increased. So we do gill netting in June. We did it for every year for quite a few years, and we've kind of scaled it back to doing it every 3 years or so now. And that gives us a sort of a long-term trend looking at what the yellow perch are doing in the reservoir. Next one. All right, so now 1993, how many years is that? 30 years. We've got a lot of data, and it's good to look at the trend and see what things are doing over time. And a couple of years ago, I started getting a little nervous when I looked at this data, thinking that something was changing and our management actions up there might be in jeopardy, and so would be the angling quality up there. Next slide. So what this graph shows is the size of the walleye that we collected every other year from 2011 to 2021. So 6 years over a 10-year period, up there collecting eggs, looking for adult spawning walleye, males and females, so we could send the eggs and milk to the hatchery to raise fish. This is sort of what their size distribution looked like each of these years. We went up in April to do our shocking. The blue bars you see are males. The orange bars you see are females. The red dotted line sort of in the middle of the graph is 22 inches. That's the minimum length that anglers can keep fish at up there. So what you see progressively, 11 at the top left, 13 underneath, 15, 17, 19, and 21 on the right. Just look at what's happening at the distribution of fish, and that what this is the percentage of catch. How many of the 100, 200, 300 fish, what percentage, fell into these different size classes? You can see that fewer and fewer fish were showing up over 22 inches in length. You've got to 2021, and that's when I really my eyes opened. When we get there, 348 walleye and 2 nights of electrofishing, only 6 of them were over the legal length limit. That's not a fishery. And for years, leading up to this, for at least a couple of years, I have been fielding calls and emails from anglers that were concerned, saying, I've spent a lot of time up there. I catch walleye. I just can never catch a legal one. It's not doing anything for anglers, to provide a quality fishery. At the same time, you want to go to the next slide? I think I forgot. So we went from 2011 having 46% of the fish that we caught being over the legal length limit to 2001, only 3% of them were over the legal length limit. So that's a concern for the fishery. It's also a concern for, as I said, we cannot take walleye out of Chittenden or Champlain anymore for stocking into Chittenden. We've changed our strategy for that. There's too high of a disease risk for that. And so we really rely on Chittenden Reservoir and our ability to get adults of spawning size to get the eggs we need for restocking back in the reservoir itself. So not only does it risk, not providing a quality fishery, but it risks us not providing a fishery at all because we may not be able to restock. At this point in time, we had no evidence that they were reproducing on their own either. Next slide. So yeah, I already got ahead of myself, but these are the 2 things that, I was most concerned about it impacting, fishing quality and our ability to continue providing those fish and getting access to eggs. Allie, next slide. All right, so in 2021, it was a stocking year. I was concerned. We got a lot of fish, but very few legal fish. But like always, we went out in November and I did my shocking around the reservoir again, looking for evidence of survival of those young fish that we stocked in June. And we started getting them. And this little cluster of fish at the top left on the top graph, that's the length distribution of those, 4.5 up to 8-inch fish, that I assume came from our stocking. And then we always get a smattering of older fish, 22, 23, 24-inch fish. And those are the blue bars in the top graph at the far right. But then we had these weird fish that just didn't seem to fit what my expectations were. These fish in the middle here that were right around, 12, 13 inches in length, they didn't fit. They were too big to be fish from that year. They were too small to be fish from 2019, which would have been the time we stocked prior to 2021. And they kind of, fell out, separated on a graph when I ran the graph on their own. They weren't adults and they weren't the young from that year. What were they? And I started thinking, geez, if these are what they should have been, what size they should be if they had been stocked in 2020, but 2020 was not a stocking year. I took a couple of these back to the lab. I looked at their bones that I showed a picture of, and they had no mark. And I was like, this is crazy. We've never seen this in almost 30 years. What's going on here? So we went back out last fall, a few months ago, did it again. All those fish, red circle on the bottom, are fish that were hatched in 2022. Again, not a stocking year. So at some point around 2020 or 2021, after 28 years, walleye decided, the walleye spawning success went through the roof. I have some theories. It's not part of this slide. We can talk about it afterwards, or not part of the presentation, about what caused that to happen. But now I have two concerns here. I have, we have very few adult fish. It's not providing a fishery, but there's some kind of, success going on here with wild reproduction. So it goes back to the slide I showed before. We want big fish. That was the whole goal of the 22-inch minimum length limit. We want to protect those bigger fish so that they can spawn and continue providing this population. That was what we had hoped for way back in 1993. It seems to be happening now. So it was a kind of the kick that we needed to say, all right, let's take a look at this, regulation that's in place right now and see if we need to tweak it or what we can do to try to support this wild reproduction and continue providing a fishery. Not forgetting about yellow perch, I wanted to throw this slide in here as well, because the other goal, if you recall, we seem to have achieved, or at least we're at the brink of seeing some of, the evidence that would support us working towards the first goal. The yellow perch goal, what's happened with them? So the green bars are the number of yellow perch caught, the average number of yellow perch caught per gill net in a June set. We set 12 nets in the reservoir in June over 2 days. And in the early years, we were getting anywhere between, 1,000 and 1,500 yellow perch per 125-foot gill net. That's a lot of fish. But then it started to decline around 2012 or 2008, 2009, and then it went way down in 12 and 13. It's kind of held at a much lower, rate at that time. Since then, the orange line that goes along the bottom and then goes up is called proportional size distribution. It's just a fancy way of saying what is the value that represents the sort of the distribution of the size range of the yellow perch in the population. The science says that in a healthy yellow perch population, that value should be between somewhere around 50 to 70. And we were under 10 for 25 years, which is a clear indication that we have a stunted population. But as soon as the abundance went down to about a quarter of what it was earlier, 2/3, that size went way up to the point where in 2020, it was 64, which means we're now seeing 9, 10, 11, even 12-inch yellow perch in the population were unheard of before. So we're seeing some good results there as well. So going back to our minimum length limit of 22 inches, it's no longer providing a fishery. Anglers are not happy. They can fish for many, many hours and catch walleye, but never one that's legal to harvest. Our management strategy of every other year stocking is in jeopardy because we can't get the larger fish that we need to collect eggs from. And so we're losing the ability to use it as its own brood source. Then all of a sudden in 2021, and then more so in 2022, throw in this evidence that we have that walleye are finally reproducing and surviving up there. We have a decision to make here. We need to increase the number of large fish to provide a harvestable angling opportunity ensure the continuation of what the wild reproduction that we're seeing, or at least have bigger fish in there that we can take eggs from in the future if we need to come back to that. Next slide. So the test water designation, you know, I presented all this information to the walleye team, which is comprised of 5 Department of Fisheries biologists like myself. I'm on the team. You know, we kind of, you know, debated and talked about what the various options were. We reached out to the public. We did a survey online and presented various management options and kind of got angler feedback. Gave a presentation to the Men and Fish and Game Club, which is the closest one to Chittenden. We also sent surveys out to the Lake Champlain Walleye Association. People seem to be, you know, very invested in this. Overwhelmingly, people thought slot limits were the way to go, which is one of the options that we were debating at the time, and that's where we ended up. So basically, the test water designation sets a harvest slot limit for 18 to 20-inch fish. So, and it's only 1 fish per angler, but that size range of fish is the most abundant up there right now. There's a lot of, you know, 17, 18, 19-inch fish. So this designation, these restrictions still allow anglers to continue harvesting fish, probably more so than they were before at 22, because there just weren't many there. But once a walleye exceeds 20 inches, it's now protected from harvest. So it will continue growing, hopefully, and feeding and become those natural brood stock in the reservoir that will perpetuate that wild reproduction that we're seeing, you know, really jump up in 2022. We kept the season the same. But you know, going forward, we're probably going to be doing more work on here to evaluate this than we even have in the past. We're going to stop stocking, obviously. That's the easy way for us to continue evaluating the success of natural reproduction. That way, fall of 23, fall of 24, and so on, we can go up there and do our fall electrofishing. Any little 5 to 7-inch walleye we collect will be wild, no questions. You know, we'll continue with the spring electrofishing, not to take eggs anymore, but to continue monitoring those graphs that I showed you before, where we're looking at the size distribution of the whole population, or at least the spawning stock, to see if we're starting to see a higher percentage of larger fish in the population showing up once they get past 20 and they're protected from harvest. Well, as I said, we'll continue doing the fall fingerling electrofishing. We'll be doing more perch netting. One thing I'm a little concerned of about is, as we grow this population, the fish get bigger. We've already seen the perch population decrease. It's not a high productivity reservoir, as I said. You know, there is a potential that we get too much pressure on the only forage base in the whole reservoir. Yellow perch is what feeds them, basically. And we want to make sure that we don't start seeing a reversal in, you know, continued decline in yellow perch and something, you know, else going on there that would also jeopardize the walleye. And we're also doing angler surveys. We're up there 3 days a week right now, all winter until the season ends March 15th, talking to anglers, doing an angler survey, looking at how much pressure is happening up there. We're seeing a lot of people fishing up there so far since January 1st. Part of that, I think, is because Rutland County is about the only place that has ice right now up in Chittenden Reservoir. But people have heard about this. They're kind of excited. I talk to them when I'm doing the angler count, and making sure they're aware of the change in the test water, and just making sure that you know, we understand you know, whether the anglers are liking this and supporting this. So that's the last slide. Yeah.
Presentation.
Was good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
How old is the 18 to 20-inch walleye? 3 years, maybe?
Yes, you know, so that's the one piece of data that we don't have from Chittenden Reservoir. We've never made a habit of taking a structure from the walleye that lets us age them. So we're going to do that this spring. I forgot to mention that. But on average, on Champlain, I can tell you, because we do have a lot of age data there, an 18-inch walleye is between 4 and 5 years old, depending on whether it's a male or a female. when we do our stocking assessments on Champlain, we look for 3-year-old male fish. Males mature for a year before our females do. They mature at 3 years of age, so they come back under the rivers. We collect a very specific length range of male walleye in the spawning rivers on Champlain to look for those OTC marks on the bones. And those are 16.5 to 17 inches at 3 years old. And then it's, 18, 19 inches or 4 or 5 years old.
Is there a worry that by dropping 22 to 18 to 20, that instead of seeing an abundance of 18 to 20 inch fish, you now only see 15 and 16 inch fish, and instead not seeing those older fish over 20 inches to be able to spawn?
Sure, yeah. I mean, that's part of the angler survey, efforts that we're doing. We're trying to gauge and understand the pressure, the angler effort that's on the reservoir. How many people are up there fishing? How many angler hours are expended in a given year up there fishing? And if it's a lot, there's certainly, and we have such a narrow window where fish can be harvested, under a really high angler effort scenario, you could have really high harvest rates in that slot that might result in very few making it beyond the slot. I don't know the answer to that. I doubt that would happen, especially since we dropped the harvest limit to 1 fish per person. That was intentional for that very reason, to give, to go back to your question, how old are these fish? We don't know how many years they will spend in that 18 to 20 inch length range. They might hit 18 at age 4 and be out of it at age 6. We don't know yet, but we're going to look at that. And that will help us, understand whether there's any risk what you're asking.
And just to be clear, these are the kind of questions we're trying to figure out. That's why we're doing this as a test water rather than, a lot of times we know what's going on and we can just come with a regulation proposal. But there are these unknowns there as to how much fishing pressure is going to crop them off, how quickly they're going to grow through that slot limit, and how satisfied anglers will be if they're catching large fish that they now have to release, as opposed to small fish that they have to release. We're hoping that the overall outcome will be positive for this, but for those very reasons you've been asking about, we decided to do it as a test water and try and figure out what's going on. And if it's clear after 3 or 4 years that it's working, we won't wait to come back to the board. But because it might take us a little bit longer and it takes 2 years to get through the rulemaking process, we're doing the test water proposal for 8 years in this case.
What are you seeing for the larger ones? How big for the larger ones?
Well, that's changed over time, but I can tell you that in 2011, the year we went up to it, we actually went up in 2010 during a spawning run, not intending to take eggs, but to experiment and see if we could shock enough for the hatchery. The first few years at 10, 11, 2012, we were getting 28 to 30 inch walleye. The biggest one I saw was a 30 incher. We don't see those anymore by any means. On average, like a 25 inch walleye was a pretty, good walleye up there. We saw some 26s and 27s, but there was a lot that were between 22 and, 25, 26 that were, harvestable. And it seems like possibly that's exactly what happened. It is a very desirable species, and people, when they catch one, if it's legal, chances are they're going to keep it because you don't get a lot of chance to do that. And I think over, the 30 years that they've been up there, that has just whittled away at that upper size range of these fish slowly, so that, as soon as it hits 22, if it gets caught, it's in somebody's front.
Any other questions? Just one quick question. What are your theories for how they started reproducing, self-reproducing?
Oh, that's interesting. I'll try to keep it short. So around 2012, no, it was actually 2012. I remember we were up there in the fall in November, electrofishing the shoreline, looking for young fish. And we started seeing smallmouth bass, and they were, young smallmouth bass. It was our first evidence or sign that they were in the reservoir. there's really nothing else up there to speak of. But somebody either purposefully or accidentally transported and introduced smallmouth bass to the reservoir. Normally, I would say terrible idea. We have rules against that for very specific reasons, because you put something in a reservoir or a lake that doesn't belong, it will change things. It changed things here, I think, is what happened, to the probably benefit of the walleye. So going back to what I said about the overabundant stunted yellow perch, there's one place in Chittenden Reservoir where most of the walleye spawn, and that's a stream that flows in from a small pond upstream in the watershed. It's a very short stream. It's got a dam on it that holds the pond back upstream, called Lefferts Pond, Lefferts Brook. It's only about a 75-yard stream, and it's gravelly and riffled. It's got a little bit of gradient to it, but that's where the walleye go to spawn. If you're a walleye fry that hatches out and you're immobile for several weeks, you're absorbing your yolk sac, you don't have the ability to swim away and avoid predation. In a lake like Lake Champlain, where they go 10, 12 miles upriver, up the Lamoille or the Missisquoi, it takes them a couple of weeks to make that drift, just flowing with the water current. They're absorbing their yolk sac, they're swimming. By the time they hit the lake, they can swim and they can find cover and they can hide. Chittenden Reservoir, they're probably from out of the hatch, spawning gravel and into the reservoir in a few hours or the same day of hatching, swept by the current right into the hungry jaws of literally hundreds of thousands of 6-inch perch that are, starving to death, basically looking for anything they can to eat. In sometime in the mid 2000s, we put special traps in Lefferts Brook. It's basically horsehair fiber mats that go into a furnace. We weight them down in the bottom of the stream, and fish that spawn upstream of those, the eggs will roll down and get caught in fabric. We do it. That's how we were doing it to look for sturgeon spawning in the Winooski River. We did the same thing in Lefferts Brook and had walleye eggs on them. And we're like, oh, wow, we knew they were in here, but we didn't know they were spawning. Here's their eggs. So we took some of those eggs, we brought them back. I put them in a 10-gallon aquarium in the office with a bubbler, and a couple of weeks later, we had little baby walleye swimming around, zooming around in that tank. We're like, okay, they're spawning. The eggs are viable. They're fertile. They're hatching. Where are these fish going? Why do we never see those turn into wild fish out in the reservoir? I think it's because even though they were viable and able to hatch, when they did, they just got chomped on by all these perch. The smallmouth bass, I said before, walleye is, a major predator, yellow perch. Smallmouth bass, even
Those
more
perch
so.
right up.
They love yellow perch. It's one of their, aside from crayfish, one of their primary forage items. I think those smallmouth bass, you're now seeing 21-inch smallmouth bass up in Chittenden Reservoir in our surveys. And I think they just did a number. That's when you looked at that yellow perch graph, when the numbers really went down, it coincides when the smallmouth bass were going up. So I think smallmouth bass decreased the perch, gave the walleye coming out of Lefferts Brook a fighting chance, and we're seeing the results of that now. So I just want to qualify that. Don't go put smallmouth bass everywhere, because you're just going to make something good. Bad idea. In this case, it just 1 in a million chance that it actually had a positive effect.
The plan when the perch level starts to drop.
Yeah, that's what I said earlier. Right now we have two predators vying for the same forage base, and it's why the continued yellow perch monitoring is an important part of our evaluation.
Can you fish the smallmouth bass and keep them in there? Is there any regulation?
It's under general statewide regulation, so whatever you can do with smallmouth everywhere else in the state goes for Chittenden. I know your next question is, why don't you open it up so you can keep all the smallmouth bass?
They're good eating too.
Yeah, we've tried that before with special regulations in other waters, and people have this opposition to harvesting bass mentally for some reason, and we can't get people to harvest bass even where we want them to, so.
Under bass, not the same.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, any other questions for Sean or Eric or anybody?
Very informative.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on, item number 7, we have an update on the coyote hunting management process. So just hand it over to the commissioner. Okay, Armin's,
Right.
or whoever.
Well, I think I'm gonna hand it off to Chris Saunders.
So this is just a brief update on where we are with the coyote hunting with the aid of balance rule. As you guys know, legislature in the last session passed Act 165 that directs the board to regulate the practice of hunting with coyotes, previously completely unregulated. The board, the legislature actually took care of a couple things in their in Act 165, including addressing trespassing and permit numbers, et cetera, and a few other things. That still leaves you guys with basically 6 major points that you need to regulate. This is very, in some parts of the state, particularly in Addison County and parts of the Northeast Kingdom, this is a very emotionally charged issue. We could have just gone ahead and drafted some regs by ourselves and fine. But the commissioner especially felt it was really important to include some of the stakeholders, particularly local about the practice and are very concerned, or also our hound hunters. Past Colonel Jason Batchelder started the process. He came up with a working group. It's a very diverse working group when you're trying to deal with this issue. We've got hound hunters on one side. We've got groups on the other that are opposed to hunting all coyotes, whether or not it's hounds or not. And then, of course, Jamie and David are also part of the group. So what we did, we started out in the fall. I had developed a survey based on those 6 points of Act 165 that I sent out to the working group to get specific regulation recommendations and preferences from stakeholders. This is not like the trapping BMP. We're not trying to get consensus. We're not a legislative charge. This is something we just want to do to make sure that people understand. We took everyone's opinion under advisement when we came up with the draft rule that we'll eventually present to you. So once we had the survey results in hand, and of course they were all one, you name it. We had people who were insisting on, only hunting with leash dogs to no limit on dogs. And on January 10th, the group came together to discuss a draft rule that we had put together based on the survey results that very much follows the template of the current variable. Because of the potential contentiousness, because of stuff we've seen trying to work with the trapping BMP group, we actually hired a professional facilitator. And when we talked to the facilitator about our goal, which is really just to get stakeholder input on this draft, she decided the best way to be literally to have the folks get the draft rule when they got there and review the rule point by point, including the logistical stuff, including the stuff you guys don't read, that most of us never read. But we went through it one by one. And, thank goodness for the facilitator. There was, occasionally emotions would rise, but she was able to keep us on track. So we're expecting the report from her, the summary report of the comments. We did take notes too, but she would be providing a summary either tomorrow or Friday, and then we will take those comments and then go back and look at the draft rule and then work on it and then come back to you guys. Probably, I think Mark was thinking the March meeting to actually start the process for the draft. Questions, thoughts?
David or Jamie, I'd be happy to hear your thoughts where they were active with the group. I think they're really